Hey everyone, we're here with,
Hello.
of course, well, you guys all know Marilyn and Duncan, and by now everyone
Oh,
should know, but just in case, Mark Terry. Welcome everyone,
Hello?
Hi.
right, Marilyn?
Hello. Yes. Hi. Right, Chad?
yeah. Welcome to the first Star Trek edition
Yep.
for all you nerds out there.
yeah, we're going to get really nerdy with Mark Torrey.
Absolutely.
Yes. I have been waiting
So-
my entire life for this. So I've always wanted to present on why people should watch more Star Trek, especially in PowerPoint form. It's what I'm good at.
Excellent.
That's cool.
I'm so excited. Yeah.
Me
Hopefully
too.
Steve-O will pop in at some point. But so Mark, here we are.
Yep.
And I think I hear a beep. It might be him.
Yep.
There
Oh,
he
awesome.
is.
Hey, there he is.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Steve.
Everybody.
Welcome aboard,
Jeez.
Steve-O.
We're just doing introductions and
Awesome.
about to get nerdy.
Oh, I need glasses to be nerdy. Hold on.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I got my nerdiest glasses out. Marilyn didn't like my
Excellent.
blue ones that were, glary. So these are a little glary, but they're nerdier, so they're better fit.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll
It's a
keep
requirement.
poking. There we go.
but Get that piece of tape.
Oh, that would have been great. It should have-
Oh
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
has
think
been
about
known
that.
to put duct
Oh,
tape
shut
on
up.
his glasses.
Hey, whenever it takes crazy glue, it doesn't show up as much, but it works.
Oh, I use duct tape almost every day.
Yeah. So does
Oh, you know what I use is JB Well, but
That's better.
Ooh,
Epoxy,
Not
man.
even
it's
nicer.
great for
Well,
plumbing.
that'll fix almost
Oh, I
anything.
use duct tape almost every day. Oops, sorry about
Good stuff.
your echo?
that.
Hey, can I tell a tiny story how I got into Star Trek?
Sure, of course.
It'll only take
Yes.
a minute. Yeah, so
He's like raring to go. He's so excited
I'm all
about this.
charged up, man. This is
Great.
I'm stoked. I get my STPTV coffee and everything. But yeah, so my Star Trek history goes back to when I was a little kid. I think I was probably 10 or 11 at most. And my folks had taken a trip, I think it was to Hawaii. This was back in the late 60s, maybe early 70s. And they left for like 10 days or so. And they hired some woman to live in to take care of us. So I have older brother and a younger brother. So we were just little kids. We had one of these old big black and white console TVs in our living room. And this woman was staying over. Well, it turned out she loved to watch Star Trek. And this was back in the days of the original series. There was nothing beyond the original series. So that's how I got into it. When we were kids, I was like, oh man, this is awesome. Because my folks weren't big on TV. We never had cable or any kind of thing like that back in the days when we had cable. So we had Channel 6, Channel 10, and 13 came in snowy on a good day on old aerial rooftop antenna.
Yep.
So we would watch the original Star Trek. And it was just so fascinating when you're a little kid. That got me hooked. So anyway, that was probably only, say, about 50 years ago or more. So ever since then, you get hooked. And the brilliance of Roddenberry and coming up with all this psychological, I mean, that was like the psychology in Star Trek is probably at least as important as the space aspect because it's so entertaining and fascinating. And as a result, I mean, there were a lot of very kind of culty episodes that made it more fascinating. So it's been a very cool ride. So anyway, just want to let you know that.
Of course.
That's
Thank you.
cool.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, basically what happened with myself was, so we'll get into it when I do my slides, but of course, Star Trek: The Next Generation was premiered in 1987. I was 4 years old back then, and I was aware of it, obviously, as a small kid. And we used to joke all the time because my uncle had looked very similarly to Jean-Luc Picard. He had the kind of hair, he had the gray hair with just the back and stuff. He was kind of balding. As I was a kid, the series ended when I was 11 years old. But what was actually really cool about that was the very final episode of The Next Generation, of course, is called All Good Things. And when I was 11, I was invited by a school friend to visit what we used to call the Sky Dome, which is now called the Rogers Centre in Toronto, which is where the Toronto Blue Jays play. And they premiered the final episode of Star Trek Next Generation on the Jumbotron. And so I was with my friend, Paul was his name, and his father. And through his dad's company, somehow they had gotten box seats. So we had an entire luxury box to ourselves, and we had like a snack buffet spread, and we watched the final episode. And then when I was old enough, a couple years later, when I used to stay up later than 10 or 11 o'clock at night, I was about 13 or 14, going to Buffalo, actually, the local Fox affiliate in Buffalo, which, what is it, Chad? Do you remember? It's not WNED, that's the PBS, but it's like W something. Anyway, W whatever is the Fox station in Buffalo.
Not sure.
WNED, I believe it's called. And they aired old episodes, of course, of The Next Generation, usually on Friday nights at around 11. So that was like my 11 p.m. So that was my late night. I could stay up and I would watch an episode of The Next Generation. So I remember clearly from probably ages of 13 until I was maybe like 17 or 18, every Friday night I would want to stay home because they would air an episode. So I remember watching tons of episodes mainly from the 3rd season to the 7th season. They didn't really play 1st or 2nd season, and I don't know why. I'm not 100% sure, but they would play basically almost every, episode from that 3rd season to the 7th season. And then even when I got into college, when I was 18 until I was in my 20s, then I think they changed it like in the early 2000s, and they played other programs. But that was it. It was basically there was an old episode at 11 p.m. Friday nights, and then at midnight Saturday morning. So of course that means Saturday into Sunday. So then Sunday at midnight they would play until 1 a.m. Then they play an old episode of TNG. So that used to be my pair off there. And then when I grew up, we're very lucky in Toronto because we had a network called the Space Network, which is now it's called CTV Sci-Fi. And during the day, they would play one episode of the original series, followed by TNG, followed by DS9, followed by Voyager. And they'd start at 12, and they would go 12, 1, 2, and 3. And so I caught up on so many episodes of Star Trek on weekends and on replay. Then we got DVRs, and so I would DVR different stuff. So I watched a lot. And then it wasn't until 2009 when Star Trek, all the series were on Netflix. And that entire summer, I binged every episode of the original, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. And the only ones I've returned to is Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. And I'm now completing my 6th binge of Deep Space Nine. And I'm going to go into like my 10th binge of Next Generation. So I just personally, I just love it. I have a lot of books and on that in storage. Lots of
I
books.
think you've earned your
yeah.
honorary doctorate in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh God, I know. Maybe one day. But no, anyway, it's something I know a lot of people enjoy and love, and just one of the many. And yeah, as I said, I've been planning this my whole life, so hopefully it'll go well.
Very cool.
Sure.
Very cool. My I still attribute my love of science fiction to the other series, because I was 3 when Star Wars came out, and I remember every aspect of being at the movie theater to see the first movie. It was myself and my mom there, and it was just a packed audience, and I remember every scene. I collected all of the, I say collected, I was 3. People gave me all of the Star Wars stuff, so I had a bunch of action figures, I had like the storybook, I had a bunch of that. So fell in love with science fiction right there. There were always these gaps between the movies, between the first 3 Star Wars movies, and there really aren't any other movies aside from those first 3. But there were always these gaps, and so I would always be at my grandparents, and I'd be like, I'd really, want to watch something. Oh, this Star Trek show is on, and it was always reruns. It was it was always reruns of the original series. So I would just sit there down in the basement, and on a Saturday afternoon there would be again, it was the local Fox affiliate. This happens to be the local Fox affiliate in the Twin Cities, which has since changed channels and done a whole bunch of stuff. But they used to run on a Saturday afternoon. They would run a few Star Trek episodes. So I would just sit down. I would get excited to go to my grandparents so I could sit down in their basement and watch Star Trek. Then it was 7th grade. It was when I entered junior high school when The Next Generation happened. And that was my first Star Trek, right? That was the one that myself and my friends and, we could all talk about, right? We would watch it on whatever night it was on, and it was on again, that syndicated Fox channel. We could watch and then get together and go, oh, did you see it? Oh, wasn't that cool? Wasn't that great? And get all excited. Oh, Data. Ha, 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 ha. Oh, look at that. That was so fun. Oh, that Q. But we would, we were 12 years old. So, I mean, talking about Star Trek. But that was our series. And then 7 years later, I'm going off to college, and now I have my first grown-up Star Trek, which is Deep Space Nine. And it was a little bit darker, as I'm sure we'll talk about this. It was a little bit darker than The Next Generation was. It was more serialized as opposed to show by kind of a show. Each show was a standalone. There was a lot more to Deep Space Nine, and that was like my first grown-up Star Trek. And so, and then all of a sudden the other ones came, and I didn't care, but as much. I won't say I didn't care, but that was kind of my evolution through Star Trek. So I started with this dabbling of the original. Had my first Star Trek. My first Star Trek was The Next Generation. It was like a Fisher Price toy, and then there was Deep Space Nine, which was like my first grown-up Trek, and that's part of the reason why I'm excited about today, because this is going to be my first Star Trek, my first grown-up Star Trek, and we get to talk about it. Yay! So
Awesome. So,
All right. And it's WUTV is the Fox affiliate in Buffalo. WUTV. Yeah. Western New York and Southern Ontario. Let me see here. Okay. I have my slides in. So how do I get them to? Do I just present slides? That's right. What does I do now? What do I? Slides.
do we add them?
Share
Do we add
screen.
them to the stream? I don't remember.
I did add them.
there
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, now
nice.
Here we are. All right. Okay, everyone. So, this is really, really, really cool because we've talked about Deep Space Nine just before at random on different episodes. It's almost a non sequitur when it comes to us. We could be talking about something else, and I'll just go on about the Bajorans. So I'm going to be doing another PowerPoint, because as I was going through this PowerPoint, I also added 2 slides just this morning. So there's like 18 slides here. So it's going to be mostly just on the introduction to the series. I'll introduce you to some of the characters and also the conflicts at the beginning few seasons, season 1 and season 2. For those who have seen Deep Space Nine, you know that after season 5 and then season 6 and 7, you get into what's called the Dominion War, and that's a whole other thing that would, again, needs its own, presentation. So sometime down in the future, once we complete, I'd like to do some other religious studies based philosophy and even some other history presentations. Then we'll, down the line, we can do I'll do a Dominion War presentation. But for now, this is just kind of the introduction to the series and the first couple seasons roughly, and especially focusing on like major themes and characters and so forth. So, Star Trek Deep Space Nine is a spin-off series to Star Trek The Next Generation, which, as we mentioned earlier, ran in syndication from 1987 until 1994. And there are a couple of really interesting seminal episodes in The Next Generation that introduce characters and species, like new species in the Star Trek universe, that then get expanded on in Deep Space Nine. And one of the other things was, Duncan mentioned Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry ended up passing away in 1991, which is a very, very also seminal year in Star Trek history, not just because of his passing, but because in that year and a lot of the scripts and stories that aired that year in 1991 would then again become very prominent in Deep Space Nine. And Deep Space Nine is tonally quite different from the other, and also thematically quite different from the other series, which still in the Star Trek universe, it's just went its own way and did its own flavor. And again, this is why I think it's very much appreciative, because it's much darker, as Denver Stevo said, and again, the themes and so forth are just very different. So the first episode that Deep Space Nine sort of takes from is a Next Generation episode called The Wounded, and this aired in 1991. So it's the season 4, episode 12, first aired 28 January 1991. And what's really important about this episode is that it's the very first episode to feature and to introduce the species of the Cardassians, not to be confused with the other lizard people, which are called the Kardashians. These are the Cardassians.
Which are much more sinister.
Yes. And so that's always a meme there between the Kardashians and the Cardassians. But the Cardassians have quite the background here. So in this photo, on the left, these are the original designs for the TNG Cardassians. To note, they will be redesigned later. But the person of these two actors that are in this photo, the person to take note is the one that is on the right. And this is an actor named Mark Alamo. And Mark Alamo would eventually become another Cardassian, which I will mention in a few slides. When it's redesigned for DS9, Mark Alamo also played a Romulan and a time-traveling human. So he was on at least 3, if not more, episodes of The Next Generation. And then they brought him over to play a very important and recurring character in Deep Space Nine. And then the gentleman on the right is the same actor who played the Warden in Shawshank Redemption just a few years later. I believe his name is Bob Grunin or Grumlin. I forget. Someone can check on his last name. But he is a guest star in this episode, and he plays Captain Benjamin Maxwell. Captain Benjamin Maxwell is a starship captain of the USS Phoenix, and he is a veteran of the Federation Cardassian War, which takes place around a decade before this event. So roughly 5 to 10 years before TNG starts in the Star Trek universe, there's a war between Cardassia and the Federation. Captain Benjamin Maxwell loses his family. He loses his wife and his children in a massacre that they call the Setlik III massacre. And on this time, this sort of era, he and his ship go to the border between the Federation and the Cardassians, which is called the Neutral Zone. And he begins to destroy ships and outposts and so forth because he thinks that the Cardassians are arming for a war. A lot of this is based on the book Heart of Darkness, where the Enterprise is then assigned to hunt and find Maxwell to bring him to justice and to get him to stop, attacking these at this point innocent Cardassian lives and so forth. But there's also a really interesting connection because Captain Benjamin Maxwell served with Chief Miles O'Brien, and I will mention him also later because he's kind of the glue that ties the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine together. But again, 10 years before the events of this episode, or at least 5 years before, Chief O'Brien and Captain Maxwell were serving together on a ship called the Rutledge, and they served in the war against the Cardassians. There's also a very amazing ending of this episode. If you guys like Irish folk music and Irish music, there's this song called Minstrel Boy, or The Minstrel Boy, and Maxwell and O'Brien actually sing it at the end of the episode, and it's actually a really, really amazing episode. There's not a lot of action. It's mostly a thriller. You don't really see any explosions or anything. It's not like that, but it's a great thriller. Its performances are really great, and it's got kind of a very bittersweet ending, and it's again very seminal for and influential for introducing the Cardassians. The next one comes a little later in the year, and in the next season, which is the episode Ensign Ro. And this is from season 5, episode 3, and it aired on the 7th of October, 1991. So that's 10 months after The Wounded. And this is the first episode to introduce the Bajorans in the Star Trek world. They had, like the Cardassians before The Wounded, obviously they had been around, but they had never been explored, and this is the first time we meet a Bajoran person, and that word Bajor and Bajoran gets mentioned. So the two photos here, the photo on the left is not from that episode. It's from Deep Space Nine, but I wanted to use it because you can kind of look at the cross pattern or cross section of people in the Bajoran, in this photo of the Bajoran people. This is from a Deep Space Nine episode called In the Hands of the Prophets. And one of the things you might notice is that there are some religious-looking people, monk-looking people, or clergy-looking people in it. And again, I'll get into that in a moment, but that is something to note. Going to the right here, this is Ensign Ro Laren. She was played by actress Michelle Forbes, who is incredible. She's one of my favorites. And she had a somewhat reoccurring role after season 5, episode 3. She was actually previously in an episode with an old actor named David Ogden Stiers, in which he's on a planet where people have to undergo euthanasia at the age of 60. And it's him and Lwaxana Troi. It's actually a very good, very, very good episode. And Michelle Forbes, plays the daughter. So they brought her back. And I think she's at 6 or 7 episodes as Ro, and the 1 episode as, David Ogden Stiers' daughter. In season 5, 6, and 7, when Ro is on the Enterprise in The Next Generation, she does get into the fact that the Bajorans are a spiritual people, that they're a superstitious people. There is an episode called The Next Phase with her and Geordi, where they become cloaked and they kind of run around the ship, and she's talking about how she's a ghost and this kind of thing. So even her introduces, although she doesn't say the words like wormhole or prophets, which we're going to get into later, she does introduce some of the, I guess you could say, superstitious or spiritual side of the Bajorans. And then, of course, she has a very good episode in season 7, the second to last episode of the entire series. It's called Preemptive Strike, and it's a very good episode, and it's very underrated because, of course, it's just before the finale, which was incredible. But she has a very good story arc, and so I really love her character. I wish they used her more. I think she was only in maybe 6 or 7 episodes. But again, these are the Bajorans. So we have both in TNG the idea of the Cardassians and the idea of the Bajorans, and so they become introduced in those shows, and they will later become fully imagined and realized in Deep Space Nine.
Just to interrupt really quick, sorry.
Sure.
And you maybe, if you've heard differently, can clarify this for me. I was under the impression from what I've read that her character was originally the catalyst for Kira Nerys, and that originally it was going to be her in that position, but in the development of the story and casting and whatever all goes into that whole piece of it, that ended up not being the case. But she may have been, she may have had what am I trying? Been a co-star in Deep Space Nine, had things played out just a slight bit differently with regards to development of the scripts and whatnot. So I don't know if
that's right.
Okay.
It is true, yeah. So Ro Laren, when they were in the original, because you need to have a character, right, to do a spin-off. So you need to have one character that goes into the next. So like Cheers and then Frasier. So Frasier was the carryover.
Right.
And it was supposed to be Ro Laren, and she was supposed to be Kira. But from what I read, Michelle Forbes turned it down. Maybe she just didn't want to do a series at the time, or who knows. But yeah, she was supposed to be Kira Nerys. There's also another lore, we'll talk later about that, about how there's a season 5 episode of TNG that stars a guy named Nick Locarno, who's in the First Duty and stuff, and he's basically Tom Paris. Like, he is Tom Paris, but they couldn't use the name Nick Locarno. And anyway, played by the same actor. There's a whole bunch of stuff like that going on in Star Trek, where something happens. Anyway, so there's a lot of stuff like that. So here we go.
Poor Wesley.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, the casting and whatnot. So anyway, the very first episodes, the 2 episodes, which were back-to-back episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, is called Emissary, and they're split into parts 1 and parts 2, and they aired on the 3rd of January 1993, and this was halfway through the 6th season of Star Trek The Next Generation. And in the first episodes, the part 1 and part 2, we do get Jean-Luc Picard. He also makes a cameo appearance in both part 1 and part 2, as does the Enterprise. I was just watching it. I actually just finished it not an hour ago, both parts. And what I love is there's a scene where Miles O'Brien goes to the bridge, but I guess they couldn't afford anyone else but Patrick Stewart. So Worf is not there, Geordi's not there, Crusher, nobody's there. It's some random lieutenant we've never seen before, and then there's Jean-Luc Picard. So they couldn't afford anyone else. But the holdover, again, is Miles O'Brien, and Chief Miles O'Brien. And so when we look at this photo, this is a still from either season 1 or season 2. I think season 1, just how everyone looks. But if we look at the above row, and we start with the far left, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, right, at the top and 2 at the bottom. But if we start from the very far left at the top, that is Miles O'Brien. He's, of course, in the black and gold uniform. And he has a interesting rank history on the Enterprise, because he's an ensign and then a lieutenant and then he's a chief petty officer. But eventually he becomes a transporter chief, and then he joins DS9. He also was approached to do the series, didn't really want to do it, but they kind of talked him into it by making him have an expanded role for Chief O'Brien, and he is one of my favorite characters. There's some terrific acting that he does in this show, including, I think, a season 4 episode called Hard Time, which is amazing, and so on. So that's Chief Miles O'Brien, played by Colm Meaney. He's the carryover. The young woman is next to him in the black and blue uniform is Jadzia Dax. Her species is called a Trill. Also, interestingly enough, like the Cardassians and the Bajorans, the Trills were first introed in an episode of The Next Generation, and then they were redesigned. And Trills are kind of interesting. They're known for having an actual slug that is placed into their stomachs, and it's called a symbiote. And the symbiote has the memories of different hosts that they've taken over, that they've joined with. And so even though Jadzia Dax looks 28, she's actually like 600 and something, because of all the hosts of the symbiotes. And so she only lasts until this end of the 6th season contract thing. And then in the 7th season, there's another Dax named Ezri, who is also, I think I really like her as well. But that's her. She's the chief science officer. Next to her in the black and red uniform, of course, is Captain Sisko, played by Avery Brooks. And I'll get into some of his backstory in a moment. Next
always
to him
fun
in the
to
orange,
just going to say, always fun to watch Sisko and Dax's relationship as he calls her old man and she's a 28-year-old woman. So
Yes, because the previous host was an older troll man named Curzon Dax, and he was friends. Curzon was friends, like best friends with Sisko, with Benjamin
Right.
Sisko. But you're right, old man. So the other gentleman there in the uniform that's sort of bright orange is Odo. He's a changeling and a shapeshifter, which happens to be the same species of what's called the Founders. And again, when I get to the Dominion War, I'll go through way much more about the Founders and the Dominion. He's also placed into the series very similarly to Mr. Spock and Lieutenant Commander Data, which is he's the non-human that's trying to make sense of the humans. And so he's very much in some cases the audience in the show, trying to discover who they really are by being surrounded by these situations. The next is, of course, Kira. She's in the pink uniform up front. Major Kira Nerys, again, could have been Rolarin and Michelle Forbes, but I think Nana Visitor, which is the actor's name, is incredible. She is my favorite character of the entire series, and probably second to Jean-Luc Picard, and maybe Scotty is up there with my favorite characters in the entire franchise. The performances, the writing, the stuff they give her, they put her through the ringer. It's just incredible. Above her, next to her, the gentleman in the blue and black uniform is Dr. Bashir, and he's played by Alexander Siddig. And then the two that are in the bottom of the picture on the left is Jake Sisko, who's of course under Benjamin Sisko. He's played by Cyril Lofton, 14-year-old son of Benjamin Sisko. And then all the way to the far left far right, on the bottom is Quark, and he's the one in the second one in makeup next to Odo. So he's a Ferengi, and the Ferengis were also introduced in the Next Generation. They were supposed to be a terrifying villain, but they ended up being way too comical. And so there's not much known about the Ferengi. They appear from time to time in the Next Generation, but again, they really become more pronounced and evolved in Deep Space Nine, particularly with what are called the rules of acquisition and the Grand Negus and all these kinds of really interesting things that develop around there. So I wanted to get into the actual, where we find ourselves when we meet Benjamin Sisko. So the first thing with Emissary, again, going back to the pilot episode, the very, very first scene is at the Battle of Wolf 359. This is a really, really cool sort of Star Trek legend of battle that took place in between the third season and the fourth season on the Next Generation. So that was a couple of years prior in 1990. So season 3 ended in the spring of 1990. And in September of somewhere around there, in the fall of 1990 was the fourth season. There's some lore behind the fact that Patrick Stewart had not signed a contract, so they were not too sure if he would come back for a fourth season. But eventually the storyline is that this battle happened close to Earth, because in the episode there's a Borg cube takes control of Jean-Luc Picard. He becomes Locutus of Borg. And this Borg cube is heading towards Earth in order to invade it and make it part of the Borg collective. Part of the lore is that 40 starships are destroyed, over 11,000 people. One of those starships is the USS Saratoga. And Benjamin Sisko is the executive officer aboard that ship, which is the small one in the front. There's sort of two bigger ones in the foreground. In the background, you see there's a smaller ship and the Borg cube. It's being towed there with a tractor beam. That is the Saratoga. His wife, Benjamin Sisko's wife, and Jake Sisko's mother, whose name is Jennifer, is killed during the battle in their quarters. And then after the battle, Sisko goes to work at a shipyard on Mars, which if you've seen the first season of Picard, you might know it. It's called Utopia Planitia Fleet Yard. And he is there for the preceding 3 years, designs the Defiant, which again, I'll get into when we get to the Dominion War, and is originally very reluctant to take command of Deep Space Nine because he actually wants to quit Starfleet and sort of has become a civilian again due to some things not really working out and being rather kind of depressed. And so that's where we see Benjamin Sisko when he takes command of Deep Space Nine. And that's sort of the first, I guess, 10 or 20 minutes of the first episode. So during the episode, later on, through the later half of the first part and during the entire part of the second part, takes control of Deep Space Nine, and I will get into the specifics of Deep Space Nine in a moment. But really, the main theme and the main crux of the episode is that on a runabout, Dax and Sisko go to this area of space called the Denorius Belt because they're finding some readings, some unusual readings, and when they get there, they find that there's a wormhole there. So they go through the wormhole and they appear in what's called the Gamma Quadrant. Again, I apologize, but I'll get into what that means during the Dominion War. Essentially, they're around 70,000 light years from where they were, so it's a very long time. But they find that there's something really strange about this wormhole, which is that it's stable and that it's always in that same place. And when a ship approaches this area of space, it suddenly appears. So Benjamin Sisko and Dax, thinking that they have just discovered the worlds or universes, I guess we could say, the universe's first stable wormhole, decides to go in, and it's there when something kind of profound kind of happens to them, and they meet these creatures, which are either known as the wormhole aliens or the Bajoran prophets. And so, yeah, the wormhole is discovered, or maybe rediscovered might be the word, by Sisko and Dax. And there's a line that actually says that it's been rediscovered after about 10,000 years. And that's because in the mythology and in the stories, the religious stories of the Bajoran people 10,000 years prior, there actually was someone who was able to communicate with the prophets. And 10,000 years is around this time of the first, I guess, revelation or the first prophecy that was delivered from the prophets to the Bajorans through this individual from 10,000 years prior. So again, are these wormhole aliens, or are they the Bajoran prophets? The beings themselves that are in this wormhole, they're the ones that keep it stable. And they are called non-corporeal beings. What that means is corporeal means that it has a form or a body. So they don't have a form, they don't have a body. And these beings, they don't experience time in a linear fashion. They don't know what past, present, or future is. They don't have words for that. It's beyond their control. So when asked, when given this idea of the past, they just don't have any idea. Sisko, when he is in the wormhole, is appointed to be their emissary. And of course, an emissary is someone who speaks on behalf of another person, especially if it's an exalted person. And these aliens in this wormhole are essentially gods to the Bajoran people. And they have been able to predict the future, and they've been able to see into the future. And so this is why the Bajorans have a lot of scriptures about them and stories about them and so forth. And what actually does happen when in the Gamma Quadrant, when Dax and Sisko are going back to their own sector of the galaxy, Dax is actually transported back to the station in a way that you'll know if you've seen the episode. But the aliens, they contact Sisko, and they show him what's called the Celestial Temple. And it's at this point, again, where Sisko becomes an important figure in the Bajoran religion. And how the prophets are, I guess, appear before people is usually through visions, usually through memories. They take the bodies of people that they know, but they don't inhabit them because it is just in like a dream or a vision. So in one of the visions, for example, Sisko is talking to the prophets who look like his late wife and other people from DS9, and the prophets are speaking to them. But of course, it's not like an exorcism type thing, because it is probably going on mentally or perhaps in another realm. And again, they are able to manipulate reality and time and so forth in a very interesting way. And yeah, so this is like the first time in the Star Trek history that we get to explore a different religion. And it's also one where a Starfleet officer becomes a very important religious figure to another species. And of course, in the first few seasons, Benjamin Sisko, being a Starfleet officer, is very reluctant to take this job. He doesn't want it, but by season 6 and season 7, whether or not he really believes it is up to anyone's sort of guess. But he becomes a lot more tolerant of it as time goes on. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of background on the actual station. Okay, so the first thing to note is that Deep Space Nine is not actually a Federation star station or starbase, space station starbase. This design, it is actually a Cardassian station. It was built by Cardassians, and when it was a part of Cardassia, it was called Terok Nor. What happened was that in the events between Benjamin Sisko coming aboard and becoming a commander, previous to that, there was a treaty that was signed between the Federation and the Cardassians. And this is when what is called the Bajoran occupation, or the Cardassian occupation of Bajor, ends. There are some borders that are redrawn. And again, some of the stuff I'm going to get into this presentation, some of those details I'll have to go into my Dominion War presentation. But essentially, Terok Nor is, I guess, appropriated in some sense, and becomes Deep Space Nine. And the gentleman on the right is Gul Dukat. This is Marc Alaimo, the same exact guy who was in this photo. Same actor who's in the photo here on the Cardassians on the right. Marc Alaimo is the same gentleman who is here on the right again.
He looks better without the stupid helmet.
Yes, exactly. The helmets were one of the. This is the redesign. The helmets were weird. The headgears, it was really strange. He does not play in the Next Generation. He doesn't play Gul Dukat. He plays someone or other. But he comes back, and he has a reoccurring character through all 7 seasons, and he is amazing, especially in the 7th season when like 5th, 6th season when his daughter dies, is killed, and he goes downhill, and his acting is absolutely incredible. So
Spoiler alert.
Well, they were about to find out anyway.
I know. He is my favorite of all of the Deep Space Nine characters. Actually, there are 2 Cardassians that happen to be my favorites of the entire cast, and he is one of the 2. So,
yeah, and again, the acting is incredible. So that's Gul Dukat, and he, of course, was Terok Nor's commander. As far as the position of the station, originally when we first get to Deep Space Nine and we meet Kira, and also Captain Picard is on board and Sisko comes on board, whatever, it's orbiting the planet of Bajor. And why that is because it actually served, meaning Terok Nor, when it was a Cardassian station before Deep Space Nine, served as an ore processing center. And that's basically what it was. So they did the mining, I guess, down on the surface, and they brought all the ore or whatever up to process, and they used the station for that. There's other things I'm going to say about that in future slides, but that's the gist of it. However, when they discovered this wormhole in this Denorius belt here, get the name of it now, Denorius belt, when they discovered that, Kira decided to move the station to the Denorius belt and put it where it's essentially guarding and protecting the wormhole, so Bajor would be able to have claim over it. And so the location is approximately 7 light years away, and it takes somewhere about 5 hours to get to from Bajor. So I guess that's like between here and Prague, so not that far. Yeah, basically that's where it stays from the middle late part of the emissary, like part 2 until forever. Okay, so it's just moved. And so again, first it's orbiting Bajor, and then it moved, and now it's guarding and protecting the wormhole. And that's the whole point of the station, which is to receive ships that come from this gamma quadrant. And that's really what's going on in the first season, is they're discovering different species and so forth. So this whole thing about occupation is something that we hear all the way back at this point in the Ensign Ro episode. And also there was another character who was Bajoran. Her name was Ensign Sito Jax. And she was a young Bajoran officer who was famously in the Lower Decks episode of season 7. And she mentions this occupation and so forth. So there's always this idea that the Cardassians occupied Bajor. So why is this kind of significant? Because the occupation of Cardassia of Bajor comes to an end with this treaty, which is in the year 2369. That's the Star Trek year, so that's 93 essentially. And it was supposed to have taken place over 50 years. So many of the characters that we meet along the way who are Bajoran, such as Kira, we're going to talk about the Kais later, we're going to talk about the Vedics later. A lot of those people were born into the occupation. That's all they've known. And so there was really never a time, at least for those who are in the younger generation, they never knew what it was like to live without Cardassian occupation. The Cardassians, of course, I mentioned before, mining. They basically mined and tapped into every natural resource that the Bajorans had on their planet. And when they left, they scorched the earth. And so there's a couple of wonderful episodes that are really quiet episodes. One is called Progress, which I also believe is in season 1, where it has to do with Kira going to a farm and trying to get some replicators back from an old man. It's actually a really interesting episode. There are forced labor camps, which is what we learn, and we'll get to an episode called Duet in a moment. There is slavery. The forced labor camps, the mining, Bajorans were never paid for anything, so they were enslaved to do that work by the Cardassians. And in the end, the total Bajorans that were killed during the occupation was roughly 10 million. And the word genocide is used quite a bit in the series to explain the brutality of this event. And the other thing is the Bajorans, such as Kira, organized themselves, of course, into armed resistance cells. And we do meet some of her friends later on. There's a character called Shakar, who was a member of her cell, and they become romantically interested in the 3rd season, 4th season, somewhere in there. And there's other people that we meet in Kira's past. And one of the real interesting things is the debate between, what is a resistance fighter or a liberator versus who's a terrorist. Because according to the Cardassians, they came and to Bajor, and they, opened up the mining industry, and they did all these wonderful things for Bajor, and they call them terrorists. And of course, to some extent, even though I obviously would agree that the Cardassians were, horrible occupiers, and that the Bajorans were resistance fighters, it is also an interesting debate to say, like, well, where's the line between a resistance fighter and a terrorist? Because the Cardassians call them terrorists, and they say they committed terrorist acts. And of course, the Bajorans don't think that. And there's a lot of amazing dialogue between Kira and other Cardassians about this throughout the whole series, and it's just really fantastic. And of course, the photo on the right here is what they call a matte painting, which is just something they would put over almost like a green screen or something to sort of show when they were on Bajor. We mentioned Star Wars earlier. I think Bajor kind of looks like Naboo a little bit. Lush green rolling hills, looks very peaceful, very nice. Looks like, Naboo was shot in Italy, so maybe that's where it's supposed to be. Rolling hills, lakes, rivers, and so forth. So this is the matte painting that they show whenever they're in Bajor. a little cut off again because of the transfer between PowerPoint and Google Slides, but it says forced Cardassian labor camps. And this is again a real interesting part of Deep Space Nine. This is an episode called Duet. I really, really love this episode. It's probably my favorite episode of the entire series, and one of my top 10 favorite episodes of Star Trek of all time. Happens early. It's in season 1, episode 19. And season 1 is very up and down. This is literally not just the best of season 1, but probably one of the best of the whole series. And it's really predicated by the acting of 2 individuals, which is Nana Visitor, plays Kieran Reese, and this is an actor on the left here. His name is Harris Yulin, and if anyone saw the show Ozark, he actually plays Laura Linney's father in the first couple seasons of Ozark. Fantastic actor, very distinctive voice. And he's a Cardassian male who comes aboard the station on a regular transport, and he declares that he needs medication for a very rare, disease. Don't know why that happened, but a very rare disease. And of course, it's Star Trek, so the disease is so specific that it could have only have happened and occurred in a mining incident at a very specific point of time in a very specific location, which is called the Galatep labor camp. And it's kind of like, I don't know, if you try to trace a flu vaccine back to or a flu virus, and you could only get it if you were at this time in this place. It's a little science fiction-y, but I find that it works. And the disease is called Kalanora. And so Galatep labor camp is basically described as a concentration camp, as something like Auschwitz. People there had typhus, they had cholera, they had horrible diseases, typhoid and whatnot. And this also aired, this aired around 93, 94. So it was roughly up around the 50-year anniversary of the end of the Holocaust and also of D-Day. And so it's a very interesting year that it comes out in 1994. So as the lore goes, Kira's resistance cell liberated Galatep. And there's a line that she says about Galatep, about how when she liberated it, what the things that she saw, and she saw humiliations and all this kind of stuff. And it's very reminiscent of the Allied soldiers liberating concentration camps. In the end, this gentleman says that he is Gul Darheel, which is called the Butcher of Galatep. And I'm not going to spoil anything. I want people to see this episode. If you have seen it before, watch it again. It is written like beyond brilliance. How it didn't win Emmys, like looking back 30 years, it's incredible. The performances, the writing, everything. There's a bittersweet ending. There's everything going on in this episode. It's an emotional roller coaster. I just highly, highly recommend it. One of the best metaphorical and sort of prophetic kind of episodes of Deep Space Nine and of Star Trek as well. So, okay, let's talk about the Bajoran Provisional Governments, which nobody likes to talk about in the Star Trek world, except for me, I guess. Once the occupation and the Cardassians leave, the Bajorans come up and muster up a government, which they call provisional. Of course, we know provisional means it's not supposed to be around forever. It's supposed to transition into something else, but at least through the 7 seasons, it doesn't end up doing that. And so there are many episodes in the first couple seasons where characters are just kind of talking about what type of government should be on Bajor. And I know not a lot of people like that. I know that's why people don't like the Star Wars prequels. Episodes 1, 2, and 3 is a lot of politics. In that case, I like it because I enjoy this political thriller aspects of it. And over the first couple seasons, there's lots of characters that we meet. Should Bajor be a democratic planet? Should it be more authoritarian? They talk about nationalism, meaning, and we talked about this earlier, the phrase, Bajor for Bajorans. Should it just be an isolated nationalistic, like we just want Bajorans, nobody else? Or should it be more accepting and internationalist, which means how much is the Federation going to do? will there be non-Bajorans that will come and live on Bajor and maybe work for Starfleet, and so forth? Again, mentioned earlier that the Bajorans are probably the most religious or outwardly religious species in the Star Trek universe. So that comes with the idea of having a religious government, in some cases a theocracy, or should it be secular? And then in one episode, I believe it was in the 5th or the 6th season, where you find out that in the past, Bajor had a caste system. And it's an episode where a gentleman who comes back through time, sort of. He's like in an anomaly for a long time. He's a poet, and he comes back to what would be the present time, and he institutes the castes, and then he goes back to the past and whatever. So they had a caste system. Or should there be more of this reformed system, because the caste system ended with the occupation in 50 years prior? So should they keep going, or should they go back to the past? And so there's wonderful, wonderful questions that are discussed and debated throughout. And I just enjoy those quiet moments myself.
Mark, let me break your train of
Next.
thought for just 1 second.
Yeah, no worries.
All of your can I say it today? All of your Bajoran merchandise can be purchased at Denver Steve. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. Just a reminder for anybody who's watching this and goes, oh yeah, I kind of want to watch it again. You can see all of the episodes of all of the Star Trek series on Paramount Plus if you are a member, or if you are paying for a subscription. But you don't have to pay for a subscription either. Pluto TV allows you to watch. I have a computer upstairs that is not connected to my Apple TV downstairs and all that crap. And I was catching episodes on Pluto TV. This is not a promotion for Pluto. You can just go there. You don't have to log in. You can watch the shows. There are commercials, but you can definitely watch the shows right on your computer, right from I think it's Pluto.tv. So if you do want to go back and review any of the episodes that Mark is talking about here today, you can do it without a subscription to anything. Otherwise, you can also buy individual episodes from Apple TV or Amazon or any of those. So feel free, multiple ways to watch the episodes. Please do. If you haven't seen some of these that Mark is mentioning in a while, or haven't seen them at all, just go and check them out. Duet, like he says, fantastic episode. To watch Emissary, I've watched Emissary several times. There were parts to Emissary that I really never liked because it's the first show of a series. Things are really, trying to figure themselves out. And I went back and rewatched them this week, and I went, oh yeah, that actually works for me. And I just needed to see it again in a different context. So please go check all these episodes out. Not now. Watch the presentation here first. But definitely can go and check them out in multiple ways, whether you have subscriptions to things, whether you don't. Just wanted to throw that out, since we're kind of at about the halfway mark, and there are probably people going, I might not remember all of this, and how am I going to go see this? And there you go. Pluto.tv, it's free. So
Very good.
That's all I have to say.
And to quote Kent Brockman on The Simpsons, do not turn to another channel. I'll go by quick because it's been almost an hour. Jeez, Lord. Okay, so I'll be quicker. Yeah, wow. So the other thing is, depending on what country you're in, you can also check it out on Netflix, although Netflix in the US doesn't have them anymore. If you have a VPN, you can find a country that does. Anywho, so the next is this thing called The Circle. That's just if you're interested in watching the first ever overarching episodes. There were 3 episodes right at the beginning, episodes 1, 2, and 3 in the second season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And if you're interested in that, this is a faction of the deeply religious and the deeply traditional trying to take over the station in Cardassia. And Bajor. And this is their logo. So it's called The Circle, episodes 1, 2, 3 of second season. The Kais are very important in Cardassia. Cardassia. I'm getting them mixed up. They're not important on Cardassia. They're important on Bajor. The Kai is basically the Pope of the people, like of the Bajorans. And these two Kais are very prominent and very influential in the show. So the very, very first Kai that we meet is Kai Opaka. She's the woman on the left. Another thing is, unlike the Pope, Kais can be women and they're not celibate. Just to make a note, because Kai Opaka had a son, and Kai Wynn, who's on the right here, had a romance with a Bajoran person who turns out to be not a Bajoran person, but we'll get into that in the Dominion War episode. And these two are very different. So Kai Opaka and Kira got along very well. She was more liberal, more tolerant, more open-minded. And then, of course, Kai Wynn takes over, and Kai Wynn is conservative, dogmatic, and theocratic, and she supported in secret. She kind of supported the Circle and some of these things. And I just want to say that Kai Wynn is probably my favorite villain in Star Trek. I mean, next to Khan, the Borg, Borg Queen, she is up there, and she's just, it's her passive aggressiveness. Because she is played by the late Louise Fletcher, who also played Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I think she won an Oscar. If she was not nominated, I think she won an Oscar for that. So these two different worlds, we have the liberal versus the conservative, and even though I like Kai Opaka, the decision to bring in Kai Wynn to have more conflict with her and Kira, definitely worth it, even though I'm pro Opaka. The next is here just to introduce to you what a Vedic means. This guy name is Vedic Barile. And Vedic Barile, the Vedics are basically cardinals, and they have a council. So if you're Catholic or you know anything about the Catholic Church, you know that the Council of Cardinals elects the Pope, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. Well, in this show, it's the Council of Vedics, and they elect the Kai. So there's a thing where this guy who has a relationship with Kira wants to become the Kai, but there's something from his past, and he kind of backs down from that. And there's a whole bunch of stuff. So he becomes a recurring character, at least from around season 2, maybe 3, up until I think season 4 or 5. The next one here is a picture of the temple on Deep Space Nine. And just because there's only 2 more slides, if you can look at the bottom left, you'll see of this temple, just past where this sort of red and gray carpet is, you'll see that there's an altar. And what's in this altar, you might say? Well, there are orbs. And I'll just briefly tell you guys about the Bajoran orbs. And this is just a very, very brief thing, because it's actually how people, and you don't have to be Bajoran in order to use an orb, but it's how individuals communicate with the prophets if they can't go through the wormhole. Because sometimes when you go through the wormhole, the prophets don't appear. And again, are they prophets or are they aliens? In total, there were said to be 10 orbs all over the galaxy. However, only 5 of them were ever named. And so this is the Orb of Contemplation. This one was returned to the Bajorans by the Cardassians. There's the Orb of Prophecy and Change, which stayed on Bajor. The Orb of the Emissary was actually found in a desert by Sisko and Jake Sisko and his father, and which is very interesting if you know the story of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So there's another important religious thing being discovered in a desert. The Orb of Time was again returned to Bajor by the Cardassians, and then the Orb of Wisdom was sold to the Bajorans by the Grand Nagus, who is, of course, the Ferengi leader. And in the end, this is my last slide. These are what the Bajoran orbs look like. This is the Orb of Time, which is one in season 5, I believe, or maybe 6, that Kira uses to go back in time to find out what happened to her mother. And then this is the Orb of Contemplation, which plays a big role in the season 7 and to the later end of the show. And when they open the doors, and the doors open like this of these orbs, you can see that there's this kind of hourglass-looking energy that is pulsating. And how it works, at least on the show, is you open the doors, after a few moments, a beam of light hits you, and then you go into that dream sort of trance sequence, and you're able to communicate with the prophets based upon whatever you're doing. So in time, Kira opens the door, the light shines, and then she's back in time, and so forth. So these play a very interesting and influential part of the series. So that is all I have for today. And again, we will go through the Dominion War at another time. But thank you guys, everyone who's out there, for listening. I hope it wasn't too long. I'm going to probably cut it down to a couple videos and put them on my channel. And yeah, just hopefully everyone enjoyed it. And thank you very much for letting me do this. I really do appreciate it.
No, thank you, Mark. Much appreciated. And I do want to say that the orbs, if put into a glove, Thanos could steal and snap a. Oh wait, that might be wrong. Sorry, I might be getting things confused here. But
different franchise.
Different franchise. Different ownership altogether. Ah, hey, something Disney doesn't own.
Yeah. Not yet.
Not yet. Jeez. Sorry, now I'm lamenting on that notion.
Very great.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. That was yeah, there's so much so to say, and to really emphasize what Mark is saying. There's a lot to Deep Space Nine. There's a lot to Star Trek. It's not just, we call ourselves the nerdy bunch. It's not just nerdism, although I think a lot of us nerds in chat can really appreciate that. But there's a lot to history. There's a lot of paralleling society. I mean, the prison camps paralleling the bad guys from World War II's, who I'm not going to say because I don't want to demonetize Chad's channel.
Yeah.
Those guys, I mean, there's similarities there, and there's intentional similarities. I mean, the writers aren't writing just to write. The writers are writing to and have always been back to Gene Roddenberry in the beginning. It was always to parallel society, and it was always to look at our society from a different point of view. And Deep Space Nine does that as wonderfully as The Next Generation does. Even the series that aren't as good, still do the same thing, and still intentionally intentionally do the same thing. Marcus, I don't know if you can or can't. I've always danced around that word, saying it out loud. You can certainly say it in chat, but
with YouTube, if you just think it, he's probably demonetized, right?
Well, with YouTube, it seems to be the case. Google can read your mind, so yeah.
Yep.
No, but absolutely. But anyway, the idea just being that, yeah, this is the whole intent. There is parallels. There are parallels to the Catholic Church and to religion and society, and very well done in a series like Deep Space Nine. Whereas these things were touched on the original series and touched on in numerous ways in The Next Generation, but really some of these ideas really get to be explored in Deep Space Nine, whereas some ideas that may have just been touched in Deep Space Nine got to be explored in Voyager. I mean, it's the same kind of thing, right? Oh, if that really stuck with the audience, if the audience was interested, let's explore that further. And the Bajorans and the Cardassians, not the Kardashians, they stuck with the audiences of The Next Generation, so it made sense. There were talks for years about doing a Klingon series, a series that very much evolved around the Klingon society. That didn't happen. Not that didn't stick with the audiences of Star Trek, but the Bajoran Cardassian story really hit a nerve in The Next Generation, and really kind of happened. Plus, it's sometimes hard to develop stories that can continue on, and even a space station story. Oh, how do you have a story that's going to go on for 7 years about a space station? Well, obviously, the next or Deep Space Nine realized that that could be a problem. Just wait for stuff to happen to you. Sorry, microphone. And so they left the space station. They explored around the wormhole, the other side of the wormhole, and what happened there in the space station just happened to be kind of the anchor point, much like the Enterprise was the anchor point for the Next Generation. So thank you, Mark. Thank you. That was a great review of the early half.
I'll chime in a little bit too. Yeah, thank you, Mark. That was definitely a deep dive into DS9. I never got that deep into it, but I appreciate all the work you've gone to.
You will now
explain this. Yeah. Personally, I'd love to do a deep dive into the whole Borg aspect because it's so
Sure.
kind of symbolic of the cult mentality and things like that. There's certain episodes and all that have a lot of illustrations of cult behavior, and even some of the early episodes, like you were saying, and Steve-O was saying, that were almost prophetic. Like the very early episodes are introducing a lot of concepts that were way ahead of their time, and just bringing in all these different people, different people groups from all over space interacting, and just introducing so many things about, addressing racial type issues. That school episode, things that we're dealing with now that were being sort of brought out way ahead of their time. So, Roddenberry was very future in his thinking, and they've tried to keep that going. Like even some of the space related things are prophetic, and really, a lot of it is based on actual science. They stretch it, but they're using what they did know and do know about space exploration. So there's a lot of learning. It's very intriguing. I wonder how many people were intrigued enough to get involved in NASA or space travel or any of these things just out of this. You really start to learn the science and engineering behind it. So it's fascinating on a lot of different levels. But thanks again, Mark, and we'll look forward to another round of Star Trek in the future.
Yeah.
It'll be coming in the future.
Yeah. It made me want to just watch more and learn more.
Yeah, some of the themes there are just like one of the things that's obviously a little like weirdly unfortunate is, so Star Trek Deep Space Nine, they ended in 1999. Just 2 years later, is 9/11, and the whole idea of who's a freedom fighter and who's a terrorist comes right back. And in fact, there's an episode called Paradise Lost, where it's really about the loss of like civil liberties because they're trying to make blood tests to see who is and isn't a changeling. And that's kind of like, you could read into that, say, well, that's like the Patriot Act, it's and that's happens years before 9/11. Now, of course, there had always had been, terrorist threats, loss of civil liberties, but then like it's sadly kind of ahead of its time and was relevant in the past for future events. There's also another one where they go back to 2024, actually, and the Earth is terrible, and Cisco, Dax, and Dr. Bashir are trying to, navigate through 2024, which on Earth was awful, and there was poverty everywhere, and so it's just interesting some of these episodes. And my whole thing on Deep Space Nine is, okay, not every episode is a home run, but even the ones that aren't as good, there's still something at the end that you'll learn. And then like once the series goes on, and once the war goes on, and once the drama builds, the stakes get higher when you learn these little quiet moments that you have with these characters. And even if it's not a good episode where you're thinking, oh, this seems like a throwaway, like why did we learn, like what, this was a terrible episode, whatever, but you'll learn something about a character, you'll learn something about the universe, and you'll think to yourself, like, get down the road, you'll be more appreciative. And that's really hard to do, that's just really, really good writing, is to make you appreciate things that you might have overlooked or you might have taken for granted. And so that's really one of the things that I love about Deep Space Nine. The more that I binge, the more that I pick up on those quiet moments. And so at least for me, that's why I say it can be a rough go the first couple seasons, but still by the time you watch the last episode in the 7th season, you watch the series finale, everything just comes together, and it's just very, very, I think, deeply meaningful. It's actually really, really cool. So, just again, just excellent writing. It's kind of a magic of good writing there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even the greatest of television series have had their miss episodes. I Love Lucy, The Sopranos, you name it, but they all move the story forward, and it's absolutely what happens in Deep Space Nine. Bad series, the bad episodes move the stories backward, don't do anything, or pointless. But yeah, Deep Space Nine did a great job of, even in those, you're right, those what's going on here? This isn't. Oh, but yes, I'm still learning something about a character, and that is, you're right. You're right. The show is evolving. The series, the characters are evolving, and you're right. They did a fantastic job with that for 7 seasons. So
yeah, I'm an example actually.
Oh, go ahead. No.
So there again, going through it again. The 5th episode of the 2nd season is called Cardassians, and it's not a good episode. It's probably one of my least favorite ones. What it's about is it's really about orphans, Cardassian orphans that were left on Bajor. So the story revolves around a Bajoran man who brings a Cardassian boy onto the station, but he's dressed and appears like he's Bajoran because he was an orphan, and he gets into an altercation. He actually bites Garrick. And there's this whole hoopla. It's not even a really great episode, but at the end of the day, you learn, oh, yeah, what would have happened to these Bajoran children that were abandoned by their parents and had to leave? Like, and the episode is not that good. I mean, the guy who plays Garrick is awesome, but like, it's just one of these things of like, yeah, the middle of the episode, it's like the actor who plays the kid is not good. He's annoying. Like, what's going on? And then again, at the end, I'm like, oh, okay, so that's how they dealt with this issue. So if you had that idea, like I never had that, I never thought of it. But if someone was thinking, geez, you have this occupation, there's going to be all these children. What happened? Well, they have an episode where they tell you, and again, not a great episode, but at least if you had that question, whether you had the question or not, they answer it. And so it's like, oh, okay. And then, they go on and they do something else. So it's not a good episode, but at least it answers an important question.
And as an FYI, Garrick is far and away my favorite character of the entire series.
Yeah.
I love Garrick to death. So. Marilyn, can you make some B tribbles? I believe some BT tribbles.
Would you like to see the model tribbles? We have 2 of them at the house now that are the same size.
Oh, I've seen them.
We've got a new one. Well, we're babysitting.
cute.
We're babysitting a new one for the weekend.
Aww.
We'll do it later.
Yeah.
Before we end, we'll grab them.
I was just thinking, I have this Theta Potato here, but if I turned him sideways and took the paper away, that's almost, it's kind of an egg, but it's almost a tribble. Little more hair sticking off of it, and I think you've got a tribble there.
Yeah, you know what I've done before is you take I have a special brush that I use to brush out the yarn, and it does turn into fur, like fuzzy. I use it for hair. Yeah. So you could brush your Theta Potato.
Ladies and gentlemen, soon on Marilyn's merch store. Theta Potatoes and BT tribbles.
Yeah, there you go.
Sounds
Oh
good.
my God. Let's do it. I'll do it. I'm going to do it.
What you have to do, though, is you have to make so many of those BTs and make them stick all over somebody's body and just literally have like a model or something. And it's just like, that's what the BTs are, because they're just stuck to your body. So make hundreds of the little BTs, stick them to a model's body all over the place. And literally, that's what Scientologists think everyone is walking around looking like, at least when you get to the OT levels, that is. So you could actually have a live, person with BTs walking around.
Pretty cool. You could sell a heck of a lot of merch that way.
Yeah.
It's a lot, mind you. I'm sure your hands will probably hurt after a while. Might be good for an internet meme.
Here's a great. Here's a sad. Where did it just go? Sad, but keeps moving. Stop talking, everybody. There we go.
Mhm.
Yeah, rest in peace, Nog. Aaron Eisenberg, far
Aw.
too young.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Nog was
Aw.
fantastic.
Hmm.
That entire cast was great, and it is one of those. I watched the first few episodes, not just the first two, not just Emissary, but you can also see where even from Emissary to whatever episode 3 was considered, the next episode was considered, you can see some minor things changed. Kira's haircut changed, and the uniforms, things slightly changed between. They kind of developed things a little bit between there, but watching those first ones, now when I watch them, I remember what I disliked about them the first time. And again, you always talk about Star Trek, and although you can't really say this about the original series because the original series only had 3 seasons anyway, and but Star Trek: The Next Generation, the first couple seasons were a little weak as they tried to figure things out and get to the point where season 3 was all of a sudden a fantastic season. Mark talked about was it Best of Both Worlds? Was that was the 2-parter, right? With so end of season 3, beginning of season 4, two of the best episodes in Star Trek, probably in Star Trek franchise history, were those two. So you see how things developed. Deep Space Nine, same thing. Even Voyager, which I trash, but I watch Voyager. I've watched it. First couple seasons are a little rough, and then it does pick up. It does figure out.
7 of 9. 7 of 9.
Well, 7 of 9. Come on, everybody.
I have a crush on her. I have a girl crush on her. Sorry.
But they all kind of figure out. Even Enterprise, the first couple seasons were weak, and then all of a sudden there's, oh my God, what happens next? It's all of a sudden it's like, it's too bad that the show couldn't continue because it finally figured out its thing for season 3 and 4. And so that's kind of the thing with the Star Treks, right? And so I watched Deep Space Nine, and I watched the beginning of the first season, and I go, oh yeah, that's what I didn't like about that. Nog was annoying. Little Jake was annoying at that point. And sure, they age and they get better, but even then, for a 12-year-old, 13-year-old character, and kudos to the actors who played those characters. No, I'm not trashing their acting. They were fantastic. But, maybe it was just when I was watching and I was 18, 19 years old, and I go, yeah, they're just annoying little kids. Now I go back and I watch and I go, yeah, I can feel what he's feeling like. There's a scene in The Emissary where Jake is like, Dad, all that they've got for me here is a cushion on the floor. And O'Brien goes, oh, we can get you a bunk from the Enterprise. And then like 3 scenes later, you see Jake and he's laying on the floor, and I'm like, O'Brien, you never you failed here. But I feel for him, and I feel for what he's going through, having to kind of give up everything for this. And so I don't know where my point is here, but I look back and I remember what I disliked, and I realize, oh, I just disliked it for maybe immature reasons. And yeah, they did, the religious aspects of Emissary. I went, oh God, blah, 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 get me through this. I want to see some battles. I want to see some excitement. There wasn't a lot of battling going on in Emissary or in the first couple, but I go back and I go, yeah, you know what? They're really building something. They did a fine job building it. It may have been a little weak. We may have been expecting something different at the time, and they gave us what they gave us, and they got us to something amazing. But hats off to who is it? Rick Berman, and who's the other guy?
I think his name is Ira Stephen Bear or something like this.
Oh, Ira Stephen Bear was one of the producers and writers. There was I think it was Michael Spiller.
Yeah.
Michael Piller was the other executive producer. And then Brannon Braga was one of the writers for The Next Generation and into Deep Space Nine. Brannon Braga is actually one of the writers. He shows up all over the place, and not just in science fiction, but he is one of the executive producers for the Orville now, kind of bringing Star Trek back to humor, or whatever, bringing some of the original Star Trek vibes back to the world. I don't know what he's doing an amazing job. The Orville is a fantastic story. Kudos to the Family Guy himself, Seth MacFarlane, for really bringing his childhood back with that. But anyway, point being, it's you may find some dragging, as you're kind of going through the start, but you've got to go through the start.
Yeah.
These series all are just amazing series, and again, they're not just nerd. They're not just science fiction just to be science fiction. Star Trek does an amazing job of really mirroring and paralleling society when they do it. So, watch an episode, Google the episode. If you don't get it, if you're like, what was the point here? Do a little research. Wikipedia talks. Has most of the episodes online, or has most of the episodes documented, and it'll tell you exactly what their point was there. And it's some amazing stuff. So
I wanted to add something to that when you're done, Steve-O. You had mentioned the scene about the scene, a few scenes before that. It touched me when the father, because I felt bad. The father had to sell this to his kid. That they're going on the kid's fishing, and he has to sell it to him that they're going on the father knows that it's not going to be great conditions, but he can't tell the kid that he's got to upplay it. So that kind of struck a chord with me.
And that was a parallel scene to the first episode of the Next Generation, Encounter at Farpoint, when parallel scene. It wasn't. I mean, obviously, it wasn't the exact same, but when we meet, so Riker meets Data on the holodeck, whistling in a forest. If I'm remembering the scene right, whistling in a forest, and then the two of them start talking, and but we know that that's a holodeck, that, and all of a sudden, boom, it goes away, and it's just this gridded room, and then they walk out of there. We don't know that when Sisko is talking to Jake, who's fishing on the bridge, and you just feel for Jake. This is just a beautiful environment. Why do we have to leave here? Okay, you find out it's a holodeck anyway, but there's some parallels just in the scenes themselves. But yeah, he's obviously living living a more comfortable life than he's going to be about to be living. And yeah, for Sisko to have to convince Jake of that, and Jake's not really crazy about it, but loves his dad, and all right, grumble, and they kind of move on, and then they get to Terek Nor, Deep Space Nine, and it's a lot worse than it's looking. And then parallel to that, or contrary to that, we meet Bashir, who's like, I asked for this assignment. I could have sat in a chair. I could have had lab grants and all of this great stuff. I could have had all of these wonderful things because I'm the best of the doctors. But I picked this because I want to be a hero. I want to be out in the wilderness. And you're like, dude, just slap you, right? The first thing we see is, okay, I'm not going to like this guy. Which, to point out a little bit, and we learn this when Sisko first meets up with Kira. Gene Roddenberry had this edict that the cast and crew of the Enterprise were never going to have interpersonal squabbles, right? Kirk was never going to look at Spock and go, you stupid son of a bitch, slap, 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 anything like that. There was never going to be this hostility between them. Deep Space Nine was the first series after Gene Roddenberry had died. They maintained, for the most part, that edict throughout Star Trek The Next Generation, even after Roddenberry had died. But they, the producers, felt they had a little bit more flexibility moving into Deep Space Nine and Voyager and Enterprise, anything after Roddenberry had died. So now, not only are you fighting the Cardassians, not only are you having these battles with different groups of different other groups showing up, but now you're having these interpersonal battles within the so Cisco and Kira are not getting along. Odo is, kind of the I don't know. Odo's kind of the devil's advocate when it comes to everything, and for the 1,000 reasons. But Odo's kind of having these, and then you have, and obviously you've got Quark, who's that too, right? Who's always trying to find the angle and oh yeah, whatever you want, Cisco, blah blah blah. So there's a lot more interpersonal battle within them as well that you hadn't seen before. So. It made it, honestly, it kind of made it more human.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not always going to get along with Mark. I don't know. I picked on you because you're the first one I saw, but we're not always going to get along with each other, and that happens. But but that's reality, and so I think Deep Space Nine did a good job of doing that without really making you hate. So Bashir, first thing I think of Bashir is, oh, I'm not going to like this guy. And it took a while to, and all of a sudden now he's hitting on Dax and, he's doing this and there's all this. I'm like, okay, but he's a good doctor. Okay, now he's got some redeeming qualities. Each of these characters, do I like? Well, you're picking on so-and-so, so I don't like you, but I do like you. So it's, it's more of that reality that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis is, I may love Chad to death, but he did something. Chad, you did something, and I'm disappointed in that, or something to that effect. But it doesn't mean I dislike Chad. It just means I dislike what he did. And right, you didn't get that necessarily from the early Star Treks because the characters were all together on everything. So
yeah.
Sorry, that was my Star Trek soapbox.
Yeah, no, I think actually one of the interesting things about Deep Space Nine, when we talk about rank, it's actually kind of interesting because I sort of mentioned it with Chief O'Brien, but for the first two shows, the first two series, everyone was pretty much an officer. You never really found out that there were non-commissioned officers, except in some of the movies here and there. Because the original yeoman Janice Rand comes back and she's like a chief petty officer or whatever. But I actually kind of like the fact that they expanded that and they gave like Miles O'Brien an actual insignia, and then you met people that they called petty officer and they called crewman, and you kind of got this idea that there was this actual big structure, and that like in order to be Miles's rank, he's got to be 20 to 25 years in Starfleet on ships, like. So I kind of appreciated that part of it. It just expanded the rules, and then there's a couple of interesting episodes where you kind of get into the fact that they're ground forces. Like there's actually soldiers and Marines that are part of Star Trek, and so it kind of expands that out a little bit more. Some people might say it made it a little more like, Battlestar Galactica or some of the other kind of series where, maybe it wasn't as Star Trek of the original, but I do think that that's at least something that I enjoyed, was the fact that it seemed more real than just always being on a bridge with like the best officers in Starfleet and happened to be on the flagship. It's just like, this is the first one that was like, no, here's just the space station far away. They're just pretty regular people trying to do their thing, and they come to this situation, and they're on the station, then they go out of the station, and they're so and they become more important. It's not like, because that's the thing, although I do love the original series and I love the Next Generation, I do they are the best of the best. I mean, pretty much they're on the flagship, they're the best of the best. And in Deep Space Nine, they're just, Miles is the best of the best, but everyone else is just trying, to do whatever in this horrible situation. And nothing works, which is always fun as well. And they don't always have the right answer. And the morality is definitely more gray than it is black and white. So that's another thing I do appreciate that about the series.
I just think of that meme, and I think it was Mark. I think you pulled it up, but it was the meme. It was what was it? It was like the entire cast of Deep Space Nine, and it was 100% efficiency. And then it was a picture of just O'Brien, and it was 99.999% efficiency. It's like like the vast majority of that that station functioning and surviving was Miles O'Brien, always running through. I don't even know what the Cardassians called Jeffries tubes, but running through tubes and running through here and ducking into this, and all of which were a little bit bigger because Cardassians were a little bit bigger, but ducking in and plugging in and connecting all these things. And you had this big hodgepodge of, right, it's like this Cardassian technology with this Starfleet technology glued to the top of it kind of thing to make it work. And he made it work. So it was, it was fantastic. And he made it work. And as a team, they all made it work. I mean, I love changing the subject again. I love the fact, and you mentioned it, that Odo was kind of always, the observer, kind of watching. He was the watcher. We were seeing things maybe through his eyes as the outsider kind of thing, through a lot of it. Brilliant that he was the security officer. So quite frequently, whether he was changing shapes or not, early on, he's just sitting there in Quark's bar, just watching, and he's just watching things happen. And that was a lot of him. Was he just got to, he had that keen eye, but he was watching things happen. And when that happened, we got that perspective, and we're seeing it as Odo sees it. We're like, oh yeah, that doesn't look right, or whatever the case may be. But it was a brilliant character, and the late great Rene Auberjonois made it fantastic. Loved that man since Benson, but what was he was in Boston Legal as well. He's just he's a brilliant character. He was a brilliant character actor, and we will always miss him. But he did just a fantastic job in that role. I mean, it was just such a great cast. I mean, yeah, just such a great cast. I mean, you've got Hawk as Cisco. You've got Miles O'Brien showed up in a bunch of those British crime, the British what's his name, Guy Ritchie films beforehand. I mean, this was a great cast. And they transported that story. Transported, didn't mean that. They moved that story into such great places, just with being them.
Yeah, and one of my favorite back and forths are always between Quark and Odo. They have such funny dialogue. Like on the original series, it seemed to be between McCoy and Spock. Right. They didn't necessarily get along or whatever, and that's kind of where it started. TNG, it's kind of hard because they didn't really have too many conflicts. Maybe Barclay and Troy, maybe that might be one. But there's just something about Quark and Odo. Like every time Odo says Quark, it's hysterical, and it's always something. And I don't know. I always love that, and that's also what you get from the those first couple seasons, because there's a lot going on. There's not too much going on in the universe, but when you have those character moments, it's quite nice. Yeah, I'm watching you, Quark. I'm watching you too, Odo. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, two great actors, and I love that back and forth, and I love how, because of course Odo goes through quite a lot, and again we'll get into a little bit during the next the Dominion War. But he goes through quite a bit of a character change. Quark does as well. But it's really interesting, to go see them at their butting heads.
The brilliance of, and again, first episode, right? We're still developing these characters. Quark and the fam are getting ready to leave. They're like, we're out of here. We're off this station, and something happens. And Cisco goes, I don't think you're going anywhere. I need you here. I need somebody to help rebuild the promenade, make make things livable, make things draw people into the station, and and he kind of negotiates by really giving Quark no other option. Cisco leaves, and what's Odo's line? You know, I didn't think I was going to like that, man. And it was just, I mean, just a great moment. And yeah, but yeah, you're right. They all go through such a development, to the point where, and I'll in no way talk about it anyway, except for making this statement. The final episode of this series, probably more so than, again, any of the other series, is quite bittersweet. I mean, very much so. So it, and that's just in the development of these characters, and where this one moment that starts everything over the course of 7 seasons leads them to. Oh, by the way, can anybody, Mark, I'm sure you can anybody else here tell me how long a Bajoran day is?
26 hours. Right?
Yeah. Look at that.
Wow.
That's right.
Nerdy.
That's nerdy information for you.
There were two moments in the early episodes. One right at the beginning where, or one was a couple episodes in where Odo tells some guy, he goes, "You got 26 hours to get off this station." And then there's another one where I forget what it was, but it was like 78 hours or whatever 3 days is. And I'm like, those are interesting numbers. And yeah, 26 hours in a Bajoran day. So
Yep. We got to get ready for the Gratitude Festival.
So did everyone say their favorite character yet? Your Mojo asked, "Who's your favorite character?" I assume in DS9.
Yeah.
So
Mine is Kira.
Yeah, I was just saying we know that Mark's is Kira.
yeah, I think mine is Garrick, who's a slight bit of a side character, but if I had to just choose from the main characters, I would tell you O'Brien, but Garrick is definitely my favorite.
And I only watched the first 4 episodes, so I haven't watched enough to really pick one.
Yeah, I liked Odo too, but I have to say, we'll talk about this in the second when we do another one about the Dominion War. Oh crap, I know his name, but now it's slipping my mind. The clone guy,
Weyoun.
Weyoun.
Yeah, he's
I
good.
loved him. He was a little villain, but he always kept coming back, and his eyes were like, yeah, he was just, I don't know. I was obsessed with him. I just thought he was so funny.
Shell's favorite character, one with cats, is Jadzia Dax.
Oh,
Gotta say, Shell, you kind of look a little like Jadzia, huh?
Yeah.
So good choice.
All right,
though.
Steve-O, calm down.
Wink, wink.
Calm
And
down,
Jeffrey
Steve-O.
Combs, the actor who plays Weyoun, also played several characters. He played Brunt, who was one of the Ferengis in
Really?
Deep Space Nine. So he played a pretty prominent Ferengi character. And then earlier he played another character. And then he would go on in Enterprise to play an Andorian. So he's fantastic. Anything with that guy, anytime Weyoun comes, or Brunt to me is one of the, that's probably my favorite Ferengi. He's got this huge rivalry with Quark. He's the one who's always trying to shut down the bar. It's just hysterical. And there's that episode called The Magnificent Ferengi, where they go to Empoknor, which is the other station, to do the transfer with of Quark's mother and all this kind of thing. And Iggy Pop, that's the one Iggy Pop's in. He plays the Vorta. And Brunt is in that one. And
It unplugged.
it's a good one. Anyway,
I mean this in no disrespect, but when I look at Chad, I think Morn. Just kind of there, and not just kind of there. Sorry, that's not the way to say this, and I don't mean this I don't mean this in any insulting way, but always there, doing his own thing, but always engaged. And you know that there's a secret story there, but you don't know what it is quite yet. So, so check out Morn, and check out Morn's history. He actually, Morn has a different his name is a tribute to a different character from a different show altogether, and it's just a fantastic. So I think, but Morn, Morn, definitely so. Great character. Strangely, a very great character.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
That's cool.
did we get a favorite character from Marcus yet?
I don't think.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I haven't seen one. 8 points of our artifact. Your Dax had a crush on her. Yeah, who didn't? Who didn't?
Yeah. Terry Farrell, man.
Right,
Beautiful. Very beautiful.
right. And if you Google her and do the images, you'll get some pictures of her in her Starfleet uniform, and you'll get some pictures of her in a very different uniform, beachwear perhaps.
Ah.
Oh, sorry. I just want to
Oh,
put
I was
this
just going to
comment
say
up.
Marcus's answer was
Oh.
any engineer. So we'll
Oh,
give
sorry.
him O'Brien on that one. So no, go ahead. What did BJ say?
Oh, I was gonna say that Keiko was
Keiko.
in some ways my least favorite because she was sort of like whiny and annoying,
Yeah.
and she's always just like, Miles, blah, blah, blah. She was the voice of reason. Maybe that was why she was so annoying. But I get it, BJ. You're right. You're right. She was a botanist and usually the voice of reason, and she was smart. She was really smart. But yeah, she was kind of a lead balloon sometimes.
But when she said, you
Yes.
know what, these kids need a school, and
She was right.
the light,
Yep.
ta-da, fantastic. Great way to find
That's
find
right.
a spot for her there.
Very true.
She definitely played the nagging wife, which was 100% a kind of a 90s trope.
Yeah.
Definitely played that. Yeah.
Keiko yelled at Worf in Disaster. That made the episode great.
I do remember that.
That's funny. I gotta watch that one again. Now I'm gonna
Ah.
be watching them all. Now I'm getting really, really into it again. Yeah, this is great.
I didn't know this. Terry Farrell is
That's
married to
right.
Leonard Nimoy's son. I did not know
Yeah,
that.
Adam Nimoy.
Wow,
Yeah. Mhm.
All right.
I didn't know that either.
Wow.
That's great. I'm just looking at some of the stuff that I starred earlier on Hata. I think she had to leave, but Kira's series of doomed romances really depressed
Yeah.
me. Yeah, and then someone else asked about the Kira and Odo romance. Yeah, I don't know.
Mhm.
I refuse to talk
seems-
about that until we get to that part of the series.
Yeah.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Stay
you're
tuned,
right.
everyone.
So stay tuned. Apparently,
We'll talk about
There's a romance.
that when we get there.
Renee B loved Quark and his shenanigans. Some of his shenanigans were fine. Some of his shenanigans were a little over the top.
Questionable.
but-
There's
but
this
yes.
episode where he's like trying to sell arms to like bad people, and it's just like, okay. I mean,
Wow.
okay.
Yeah.
And he's doing it on the station. You know?
Like you're not going to get caught. Like you haven't run
Yeah,
into Odo before. Come on. Yeah.
That's funny.
Oh, love this. Shell, yep. I'm a true Star Trek fan nerd. You and us both. That's right.
Totally.
What's this? This was interesting. Marilyn Honig.
I don't know which them was. I
Bring
gotta
up
ask
rule
him
of
what it was.
acquisition number 286.
Oh, it was probably really
Oh.
bad. It was probably like really misogynistic or something. Because some of them were,
Some of them
some
are.
were funny and some were awful. One with cats, yeah. Quark was a lovable slime ball. Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
And
What was
People
it?
were
Rule
bringing
of
up-
acquisition 286?
Yeah.
yeah. You got the list there? You got the book?
Let me
That's
see.
cool.
Rules of acquisition.
286 is.
Nimoy was from Boston's West End. He took dialect lessons in LA because he couldn't be Spock from Star
Spock.
Trek. Spock.
Yeah. West End. Yep. That's so funny.
286 is when Morn leaves, it's all over.
Oh,
Like the character Morn. So when
That's
Morn
hilarious.
leaves,
When you
it's all
mourn.
over.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, we got it.
Boston Spock.
Yeah.
Spock.
There it is.
Yeah, when Morn leaves, it's
Everybody's
I
cool.
that's
remember
oh my god, that's funny.
That's great.
Spock. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And people were bringing up the Grand Nagus earlier. Oh my
Mm.
god! And with Quark's mother. Oh my god!
Yeah.
They did go down some rabbit holes. It was pretty funny.
And I love too. I love when they're like, this actually Jeffrey Combs when he plays Brunt. He walks into the house and he sees Quark's mother, and he's like, "A female in clothing! I've never seen something more disgusting in all my life. You know, take her clothes off!" Like it's so hysterical. But one of the
So
episodes I love, they
crazy.
go to Ferenginar, so they go to the Ferengi homeworld, and they go to a government office. It costs money just to sit on the bench, and then it costs money if you want to talk to the information officer, and then it costs money if then you want to actually talk to someone who's in like the department that you want to, you know, talk to. Like if you wanted to talk to a whatever, like your mayor or something, you'd have to pay money. It's just it was so funny. Just every couple seconds they're
Everything.
dropping coins into a thing.
Mm.
Oh my gosh.
This is a great comment from BJ. Okay, I just watched Galaxy Quest for the umpteenth time yesterday, and this reminds me a little of when all the fan kids were conferencing on their computers. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is what this is that.
Yeah.
This is
Galaxy
that.
Quest is like 100% Star Trek.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah,
they,
quintessential Star Trek film, yeah.
no, without a doubt. Yeah, and again, I will say for anybody who hasn't had a chance, and it's I believe all the seasons are on. I believe they're all on Hulu now. And they may be in some other places because it's a Fox property, which means somewhere down the line it's all owned by Disney again.
Yeah.
The Orville is again, it's fantastic. It does a great job. The storylines, aside from the fact that there's a lot of Seth MacFarlane humor in there, nothing like Peter Griffin just laying there holding his leg for 20 seconds, for 2-3 minutes going, ow, ow, that old thing. Not quite that. And it's a little sad now that Norm Macdonald passed away because he had a great role in the first couple seasons of the show as well. But the storylines are very Star Trek. We're looking at parallels to society. We're telling them in a very good science fiction manner. But there's a lot of comedy and a lot of humor in there too. So if you haven't had a chance to see The Orville, or if you watched it and a couple episodes went, go back and give it a second chance. It's definitely true Star Trek, and definitely fits where things where they belong. I don't know if that sentence made any sense, but anyway, hey, fellow nerds dropping off. Bye, Vince.
I hope they do a season 4 of the Orville. I really hope they do.
Yeah, no, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I like this one. I
Yeah.
don't know how to pronounce it,
R.I.P.
but Gul Dukat's half Bajoran daughter.
Yep.
I love
Aura Zial.
Zial, that's right.
Yeah. Or, she's
She's
going to
a-
be mentioned in the next.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great character. Yeah.
I assume her existence and that piece of the story. Oh, Siri just decided to pop on. Siri, go away. Siri, leave. Is in reference, probably in one respect, to those half children of the Vietnam War, but probably even more so to those half children of the Iraqi wars and Afghanistani wars. And I mean, just that. But yeah, it's as a storyline, or as a storyline goes. But I mean, because that shit happens too, or happened too.
Yeah.
So
Zial
I
is
don't know who I'm saying hi.
played by 3 actors. And the lore goes that the
That's my
first
story.
actor was
Um,
good.
I didn't know this, but
But-
Shell, she's a nerd, so I trust her. That Seth was in Star Trek. I guess I didn't know he was in an episode
Wow.
of Star Trek. Interesting.
Fun fact. Yeah.
Marcus has got to get ready for his nerd stuff. If I can click on it,
Okay.
there we go.
Nice.
So,
Marcus.
love
I
his
think
streams.
Duncan. I think Duncan would agree with this one. Star
Oh,
Trek.
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
sorry, hi
I already
Scientology.
put that one up.
Sorry, that was the one I missed. I wasn't looking. So hi. Now I'm saying hi. Go ahead,
Hi.
put that one back up. Put yours back
Oh,
up.
where'd it go? Star Trek, the original series, superior to all others. Am I wrong? I don't know about
That's
the
a
paper
tough
mache
call.
planets.
We actually rewatched that not too long ago, a year or two, and it is actually hilarious how primitive the early series was. But yet the meaning and the psychology and everything were all there. It was just they were on extremely low budget, and you were working with like old school desks and
The movies
cardboard
were
boxes,
better.
and it got ridiculous. And of course, they stepped it up over time, and when it became it kind of crashed and burned right for a couple of years and then came back stronger and had enough of a following to totally resurrect and never die. So, but in the early days, they really were very cheap with the budgeting and they had to work with any kind of crap they could find. So it was entertaining to look back at those
That's
early
funny.
episodes and see how primitive it is.
But the brilliance of things like, I hate you because your face is black with white on the left side. and
Right,
my
yeah.
face is black with the with the white on the right side.
Mhm.
And the point was there, right? I mean, it made the clear point that this is a ridiculous racial tension, battle, hatred, but again, the budgeting, right? I mean, it was that simple, and that's what they had, right? The Klingons looked like humans, the Vulcans or the Romulans just looked identical to Vulcans. Now there's a slight difference there, but and then my favorite is kind of the storyline over time. Roddenberry said, "Oh no, the Klingons were always the Klingons. We just couldn't make them look like that." And then now there's like stories behind how they changed and developed, and kind of retconning a lot of the stories to make things to make the technology of the time be explained. But Steve Britton, we don't talk about how the Klingons looked in the original series, or
Right.
as
The
Worf
triple.
says as Worf says in an episode of Deep Space Nine that we're not to yet. We just don't talk about that.
I
We
agree
will talk
with
about it with strangers.
with Vin and Giggles. That's what makes it so great when you can go back and look and be like, this was outrageous, where you could tell. Similarly, when you watch an old 50s show and you could see, or a Western where you could see this, wow, it's just a painting in the background with one little fake tree,
Right. Right. And the spaceships still to this day, when they get attacked, like stone and rock come falling out, like a completely metallic something has stone and rock falling down on it. I'll never understand that, but that's Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was the original series. They had like how it was made, and they demonstrated how like when they were hit by something, they all had to like move and shake stuff.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
that was great.
Another thing to recommend, as well as watching the series, and somebody had pointed out that they saw on that Pluto.tv that the Next Generation is available there too. So again, if you don't mind going, watching off your computer, but going through some commercials, it's free. But there's another, and every show has its own documentary, I think, for the most part. What is it called, Mark? The Things We Left Behind? Is that the documentary for Deep Space Nine?
What We Left Behind.
What We Left Behind. Thank you. And check that out as well. What We Left Behind. I think it's a great retrospective on Deep Space Nine. In fact, it's on my list to actually watch tonight again now that I've queued it up. So we'll be watching it. But yeah, definitely give that a shot as well if you want to kind of see deeper into. I always like the behind the scenes and the how things happened, and get the characters or the cast to kind of tell their stories as well. So, BJ's Critters also pointed out the original series is also on Pluto. So we've got the original series, The Next
cool.
Generation, and Deep Space Nine, all on Pluto TV. So again,
Wow.
it's free to view. You just got commercials. At least in the U.S. Forgive me if you're in another part of the world. You may have availability via Netflix or another mode. But I found Pluto when I was just trying to watch it up here while I was still working. I had a second computer that I could just let run, and so.
Yeah, and if anyone's into podcasts, there's a podcast called The Seventh Rule, and it was the creators the cast, I should say. So it's like Sarah Lofton, and then when Aaron Eisenberg was still alive, he was on it, and they watched and did reviews of every single episode of Deep Space Nine, and then did a 1 hour podcast afterwards. So if you want to,
fun.
like the one they did on Duet, which they bring Nana Visitor in, is great because she gets into some of the stuff that went on, the background, behind the episode. I just really, really recommend The Seventh Rule. So if you have Spotify or anything like that, you can check it out.
Very cool. Very cool. I guess when you watch the What We Left Behind documentary, pay close attention to Aaron Eisenberg's response for what they were going to do with Nog. I guess I'll have to watch for that. I don't know what that means, but I see lofty or very dark and mischievous plans in the discussion there. So.
We got super chat for Chad. 10x it, Chad.
Thanks, Vince.
And we love you, all the
I
nerdy
agree.
bunch.
Thanks,
Thanks, Vince.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is fun. It's super fun.
It is.
Seventh Rule, great podcast.
Excellent.
We have an endorsement, and there you go.
Very
Awesome.
cool.
Awesome. So we had a couple other things that I'd starred earlier. You want to read, Steve-O? Because I'm leaning towards the mic.
Sure. No,
Yeah,
absolutely.
sure.
And we're blind. And we're blind.
No, fair enough. O'Brien's scene realizing he has PTSD and has become xenophobic was amazing. Yes. I think that was from was that from the Next Generation episode where he's realizing that when he's talking to Captain Bob Gunton, whatever his name is. Yeah.
Yep, that's from The Wounded.
Yeah. And it was so that's an interesting episode all in itself because you watch them and you see O'Brien's hatred in that episode. He's talking about the Cardis and and all that, and he's just and you can't trust what they're going to do, and even has a couple of those lines in Deep Space Nine, especially early on. You can't trust them. He looks at Kira and when she's thinking about surrendering the station at one point, and he's like, you don't know what they do to their prisoners or something to that effect. And so that he's got that. But yeah, when he makes that realization that, it is amazing. And that whole episode is absolutely, I mean, you feel for his former captain, you feel for him. You almost start to get on the bandwagon, but you're watching going, but I have to support Picard. This is the Next Generation. And so you're kind of torn in that episode. The episode does a good job of kind of going, which way do you want to go with this? And you're just kind of, and then he makes the realization. And then it's like, okay, I know where we are. And there's a few of those episodes within the Next Generation that are of that ilk. But yes, 100%. That's 100% an amazing moment from The Wounded there for sure. I love this. Just really quick, Frisbee tales. The OG Klingons reminded me of my uncles. Yeah, really big eyebrows and just not even real ridges, but just there's something kind of old and grumpy about their heads. Yeah, and then they just never really smiled. Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Trouble with Tribbles, God, they get it good. Ha, ha,
Oh,
ha.
I know.
Ha ha ha.
And I don't remember what season. We'll probably have to touch on it next time. But I love that crossover. It was DS9,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
season,
yeah.
Crossover.
season
It was-
5, I think it was 4 or 5,
Yeah.
somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the actor who played the guy that was the Klingon agent was the same guy from the 60s that came back 30 years later or 25 years later. So,
Wow.
same guy.
I didn't know that. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Get another super chat, Chad. Forgot to say Xenu is a she warrior.
Thank you very much.
I'm all about that.
That's right.
Yep.
Sounds good to
Absolutely.
me.
Chad
Right, I had a
agrees.
couple of other ones. Chad agrees. You know you did it.
Yeah.
We already did that one. Sorry. Oh, I can agree with this, and I'm sure Mark does too. Destiny. I loved Picard season 3. Remember, season 3 was the best, right? 1 and 2 could have been better, but that's true of all Star Trek series. That's a good point.
You guys,
Yeah,
so you guys have watched season 3, Picard?
yeah, it was really good.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
we
Steve,
I
have
think
you?
we skipped
I
over
have
some
not
of
yet.
two.
I have to.
Yeah.
I have to.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
really good.
so I
I'm
don't want
neglecting.
to I don't want to spoil anything. But I think I've
No.
said this before, which is there is a character from the Next Generation that comes back in season 3 Picard. That episode is probably one of my top 10 favorite Star Trek episodes ever. I absolutely loved it. I was floored when I saw that character. I loved it. And just the whole dialogue that they had in that episode and what happens in that episode, I was like, I loved it. I was eating it up.
Interesting. Well, now I really have to watch it.
Yeah, the third
You
season
do.
was definitely the best.
Oh, I knew I did. I
And the-
just-
and the
now I have to
finale
watch
is-
it now, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Renee B said, "Let's talk Captain Pike." I don't know a lot about. I'm trying to think.
You know what? So I assume Renee is talking about Strange New Worlds.
Yeah.
And the
I haven't watched that
Anson
one.
Mount version of Christopher Pike is incredible. And he is I think I've said it before, he is very quickly climbing my list of the all-time great captains. He's just, I mean, the show, for one thing, the show is very much back to the original series in the Next Generation with it's a hybrid blend of standalone episodes where, you know, each of these episodes, so we're going to this planet and we're meeting with these people, and now we're going to go and we go to this planet and we run into this experience and that, right? So there's that storyline that really fits the originals and the Next Generations to the most part. But it also has done, at least first season, I haven't watched second season yet, I know. First season, at least, also does a fantastic job of telling a very tale through the episodes. And there's this whole thing looming that's kind of Christopher Pike's future that was explored all the way back in the original series. But then there's kind of all these other pieces to his cast and his crew, you know, his crew, the crew of his ship, which are the cast of the show, carries through all of them as well. So it's a very well designed series, and he is an awesome captain. I did see the Discovery episodes where he had kind of first appeared. I think second season of Discovery was pretty much him running the show, but then he was on Discovery. Sorry if I spoiled anything there, but that was the first introduction to him, and then Strange New Worlds became, you know, obviously kind of catapulted from there as as their own series. Anson Mount's fantastic actor. I've loved him since he was in that Britney Spears movie back in the 90s, when he was much younger and played her love interest. But I don't even know what the movie was called, but I know I saw it once. But yeah, it's a fantastic. He's an awesome captain, and right up there with the best of them. So, and I'm looking forward to finally watching season 2, because they left me in with a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of season 1. So,
What do you think about this, guys? I didn't know that.
Yeah, apparently it is. Apparently, J.J. Abrams. I'm not a fan of those movies, to be honest, and probably Into Darkness is like my least favorite of those. However, apparently it is about terrorism and like the fallout or something of it, and radicalization. I didn't really get it from there. I saw the movie once. I thought it was really bad to my opinion, and did not like the fact that it was about Khan. I thought that was really bad. I thought they could have gone with the much better Khan, who is supposed to be a Sikh warrior, and the Sikhs, of course, are Punjabi Indians, and that's not Benedict Cumberbatch. So
it is not.
It's my 2 cents.
It could have been Benicio del Toro, but apparently that didn't happen. So apparently he was in the. I don't know if he auditioned for it. I don't know what the story behind it was, but his name was floated, and then they were dancing around. No, it's not. That's not Khan, because he had that other John, whatever his name was his name when he worked for Starfleet, but then he blew up the Starfleet thing, and it's Khan apparently. So yeah, it. While the story itself, and I can see that, right? I can see some of the components. I mean, RoboCop, Peter Weller was in there, and he played a character that I could see would have been a government official that maybe went too far in the reaction. I can see where some of that story. I didn't know that, so I'm just kind of processing it right now. I can see that, but yeah, it did not. If that was the intent they were trying to make, it in no way needed to involve a non-Khan. It was problematic. I much preferred the third one, Star Trek
Beyond,
which again felt a little bit more like not lighthearted, but felt a little bit more like a Star Trek episode, like it was a 2-hour episode, and you've got this Jar Jar Binks character. She was a little annoying, but you've got a bunch of this stuff going on, and it just felt a little bit better. The original, God forbid, the 2009 version was okay for a reboot. I could see what they were trying to do with it, but yeah, just and there's a whole unfortunate backstory with Paramount owning part of the rights and Viacom owning part of the rights as these two companies split, and so these movies could be made, but they had to be a certain amount different from the original stuff. And so there was, so that's why costumes look different. The ships were bigger and all of that. And it's just, and then then Viacom and Paramount ended up coming back together. And so there's it's almost like a never mind that whole Kelvin timeline thing that happened. Although apparently they're still debating back and forth about doing a fourth movie. I don't know if
they shouldn't because
no,
they shouldn't though, because the third one just quick, the third one didn't do well at the box office.
It did not. Now they were talking about so one, Chris Pine apparently doesn't necessarily want to do the fourth one, although they keep trying to dangle money to make him do that. They wanted to bring Chris Hemsworth back as his father, who was his father in the first film. So they wanted to essentially throw money at the problem and see if they could rejuvenate that franchise a bit, since they don't have the original series cast really to go back to again. And I don't know, it's the politics of behind the scenes at CBS, Viacom, Paramount, Star Trek, and You know, I prefer to just look at what's on the screen and enjoy it or not enjoy it. Hi, Mitch Brisker. It's great to see you here.
Oh, hey, Mitch.
Hey, Mitch.
Oh my God, yes.
Texas Star, Steve-O.
Sorry, and let's not forget
Yeah.
about our beloved Kirstie Alley, who got her film debut
Yeah.
with Wrath of Khan. She was great. I was disappointed in Star Trek 3 when they recast that character. She was fantastic as Saavik in Wrath of Khan. She was an amazing character. She did a wonderful job. She was a great Vulcan.
Amazing. Absolutely. Yeah, Vulcan is hard to do because you can come off as just completely arrogant and wooden. But a good Vulcan is a good Vulcan.
That's right. I don't know if we knew this. I do believe he said something about this at one other
Mentioned it.
point.
Yeah.
Worked in the special effects for the first Star Trek film, Total Shit Show. Wow.
Does he mean, sorry, Mitch, do you mean the 2009 or the motion picture?
I think he means the 1978 motion picture
Okay.
That's what I thought. Too.
with Stephen Collins.
Talk about another shit show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the bald
Yep.
the bald one,
Yep.
the bald lady.
hmm
Uh,
The Leisure Suit 1970s Star Trek
Oh.
Enterprise.
yes. Oh, and
Oh,
V'ger.
The
Were
motion
you
picture,
responsible
thank
for
you, I missed
V'ger?
that.
Mitch, did you make V'ger? Because if you made V'ger,
I forget the gentleman's name now. Maybe Mitch knows this, but they remastered the Star Trek the Motion Picture recently for the DVD Blu-ray release, and they put out a documentary. And I met the people who did that documentary, and I forget the people's names, but I have a friend who's a film critic in Los Angeles named Scott Mantz. And a couple years ago, he introduced me to these people who did the documentary and who remastered the motion picture. And I forget the name of the people, but maybe Mitch knows them. I don't know. Maybe. But yeah, kind of a boring movie. But then again, it led to number 2. So number 2 was amazing.
number 2, arguably the best ever.
Yeah.
The company I worked for designed it. Damn them, V'ger.
That's awesome.
Very cool, though. That is
And
cool.
just to
That's
mention
a
it-
story,
oh.
Mitch. That's a story for another day because I think that's a story in itself. Is just the whole experience of the development of that film, the special effects and the artwork and all of that. That would be amazing. So, we were fired before it was complete.
Okay.
Don't blame you
Like
guys.
I said, Steve, that is the whole
That's
stream.
the producer's fault.
It's a whole stream to talk about that.
You're right. It sucked. Oh,
Right,
man.
Marilyn?
What's that? I'm sorry, I blinked out for a minute.
I said
So-
Marilyn.
That's right. That's right, Chad.
So, Mitch, maybe you would know before me. Was there awareness to Star Wars when Star Trek, the motion picture, started in development and started being created? Because those timelines, right? 1977 and 1978. I believe it was 8. I don't think it was 79. I think it was 78. Either way.
I think they released it in 78 and 79.
78. So they would very much be on top of each other, and Lucas seemed to be so, grassroots, right? That maybe I don't know what was all going on at that point. So, so I'd be curious if they did that as a reaction to Star Wars, or if these were just two completely parallel things, and theirs just coincidentally happened to suck, as opposed to the first Star Wars just tearing open the minds of the world. So.
I think they were inspired by Star Wars. I think that's what happened, is that when Star Wars made it big, they went into a room and they're like, okay, people like sci-fi again. Let's do this, this new movie for Star Trek. And then I think they kind of rushed it and they didn't really have a script together. It did well enough that at least they could get the sequel. And of course, they hit it out of the park with that one. But I think from what I understand, is that yeah, it was one of those things where Star Wars did well, and then I think, if I'm not mistaken, they went to do Star Trek after the fact.
Okay, a reaction, definitely a reaction. So,
Yeah.
oh boy, yeah. I get it, right? I mean, understandably, they want to get something out on the heels of. They want to ride the wave.
Yep.
But yeah, you gotta have a little bit more organized because that was not a that was really not a coherent storyline. Burke, the world is a Burkepire. Maybe V'ger didn't have all the letters because they dropped you midway. There you go. They lost some of their letters because you weren't there to put them all in. Not the dust fell on certain letters, so they called themselves V'ger because they couldn't see under the dust, which I believe is as coherent as that notion was. Did you guys think the nostalgia is destroying do you guys think that nostalgia is destroying the future of Star Trek? I don't, Purple Groovy. I think that there have been some moments and some issues, but I don't think nostalgia is destroying it. I think that the fan base with the nostalgia is pushing it forward, and I think that's why things like Strange New Worlds. I think that's why things like Discovery, which, but I think that's why things like Discovery appeared, and I think that's why after a couple of misses, something like Strange New Worlds is there and is doing a good job. We can equate the same thing to Star Wars. It's the reason that The Mandalorian has shown up and done very well. And then there's been some crap since, but then something like Andor has shown up and has been Andor is probably, well, in my mind, Andor is the best Star Wars ever put to television, not on the film screen. And it's arguably one of the best stories Star Wars has ever told. Again, in my opinion. So, but we're not talking about Star Wars, but you see the parallels there. I think that nostalgia can create a dip in the interest, because maybe something doesn't hit it out of the park, maybe kind of stinks, and people go, that sucked, because we're nostalgic. But I think it also helps create some of the greatness on screen as well. So that's my opinion. Mark?
I think that the nostalgia wave works sometimes. Like, I love Stranger Things, so they can pump that in my veins all day. There's a lot of 90s nostalgia that's coming back. I've also been watching Cobra Kai. That's a lot of 80s nostalgia. So give it to me. As you get old, people love nostalgia. And the episode of Picard and from season 3 had a lot of
Picard
nostalgia.
season 3 did that for me. It was like it brought it all back, because Next Generation was
they did it well.
I think, yeah, they really did a good job.
And they did it well. I didn't mind. I liked The Force Awakens. I know that was a lot of like member berries, as they would say in South Park. I enjoyed it. Some of the other stuff I didn't. I don't know. I mean, it depends. If it doesn't bring the story along, if it's like, yeah, okay, we get it. There's the Millennium Falcon. Yeah, okay, we get it. It's the Enterprise. But there's certain things that if they dig a little deep, like this, again, I don't want to give it away, but there was this one particular episode in season 3. Anyway, long story short, they bring up some stuff that happens, and I was like, I can't believe that they're mentioning it after 30 years. Like, nobody cares about this little tiny thing. And then this thing is mentioned in the episode, and it's like, geez, I thought I was the only person who cared about that. That's when it works. But, it can also fail, because a lot of times it's like, we get it. Like, yeah, the 90s had great music. We understand. The 80s people had big hair. We get it. The 70s had bell bottoms, and the hippies in the 60s. Like, yeah. What's next? Like, what's the story? What are you presenting to me? And I don't know. I just I'm not off on nostalgia as long as it's done correctly, I think.
I want to put this one up really quick because talk about that industry. Mitch Brisker, I was offered a job on Star Wars. Everyone thought it was only going to appeal to children. I passed on the job. My good friend Robbie Blaylock took the job and won an Oscar. Good
Wow.
God.
Oh,
How
Wow.
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 Life, man, life.
Wow.
You never know.
No, and I do want to respond to this one from Mitch too. Hey, Steve, I didn't know you were so well versed on Star Trek. Your commentary is terrific. Thank you. I'm a movie guy, and I grew up on science fiction. I don't know if you were here at the beginning. Star Wars. When I was much like you, Mitch, I was only 2. Actually, when it came out, I was 2.5, and somewhere between there and my 3rd birthday, I remember going to the theater with my mom. We watched the movie twice. Yes, we stayed in the theater, and as they cleaned and swept up popcorn below our feet, we only paid for 1 ticket. Well, 2 tickets, 1 for each of us. But but we watched it twice. I remember every moment, every smell, every feel from being in there. And then in the gaps, when there was no Star Wars, those first 3 movies, there was Star Trek, and so I grew up watching Star Trek. Star Trek: The Next Generation was my jam. I mean, when I was 12, and really started getting into the history of all of these things. That's one of the reasons why, had I ever turned right, I would have ended up living out of my car in Hollywood and, hopefully begging you for a job at some point. But yeah, I was the kid growing up in the suburbs of Minneapolis, just either watching movies or reading about movies or digging into them. So, and Star Trek was such a big part of growing up that absolutely. So, so maybe there's a show in it for us, huh? You and me, buddy.
There you go.
We're not old, we're vintage. That is absolutely right. We are. Oh, I'm like a fine wine. Ladies, I'm a fine wine.
Now, if I might
Ladies.
ask Mitch,
Extra
if I
dirty.
can ask Mitch a question. I saw your interview on Cults to Consciousness. And if I'm not mistaken, because my hearing is not great, I think you said you graduated film school at Santa Monica College. If that is true, I also graduated from film school at Santa Monica College. So if it's true, go Corsiers. And yeah, that's a nice little coincidence because I thought they had an amazing program. And I took theater and film there for 2.5 years and loved it. So if that was what I heard, then, we got something in common.
Wow.
Well, hell, I'm on my way to Santa Monica to go Corsiers.
Same here.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It's a nice campus. Yeah, great campus.
It's
Beautiful
Santa
place.
Monica. How could it not be? Sorry.
Oh my God, yeah. Pico and 14th to 20th Street, and then oh my God, that was amazing. Not far from the beach, and the studio facilities, and the people there, and yeah, it was just incredible.
Yep, you heard wrong.
I heard wrong. Okay,
Uh-oh.
okay, all right. Well, I
Not
heard.
that-
Hey,
Some-
good shot. Good
Thought
shot.
I heard
Bill.
Santa Monica College.
Before he responds to that, what Star Trek character reminds you of a little, and I love that, Lil Davy Miscavige?
Maybe Nog.
Could very well be a Nog.
Could be Nog. Could be Rom.
I don't know, because they have redeeming qualities. I mean, size-wise, sure, right? But
Yeah.
I tried to think of somebody without a redeeming
was-
quality.
Who was Quark's evil cousin? Remember?
That
I mean,
was
it's sort of a side-
Gaia. Yeah,
Gaia. Yeah.
yeah,
The evil cousin.
yeah. That's true.
That's
He
valid.
didn't have any
That's valid.
redeeming qualities.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe
Back
that I don't know, maybe that oil spill from the first season that ended up killing Tasha Yar, the first season of The Next Generation. Again, no redeeming qualities and doesn't really stand that high, just kind of a bleh. And yeah.
That's a great question.
I don't know.
Maybe the Borg. I don't know. Who knows? Probably.
Very possibly. Yeah,
just
a
wanted to
short
put-
Borg.
I wanted to put this
Yeah.
up from Jen so we can explain what's been going on here. Jen Sell, I was 30 minutes late. Are we doing a group quote book club? I'd love to watch 2 at a time with friends, especially nerds. So you must have missed the slideshow that the PowerPoint presentation that Mark did. So just rewind when we're done and go back and look at that. All about
Yep.
Deep Space Nine. Only the first few seasons, so we got to do more. That would be really
We
really
will.
fun. This was awesome.
Joni Cummings, we love our Mitch. Yes,
Yep.
we
Yes.
do.
Verified fact. Yeah.
And
Chad.
Monday
Chad,
night, maybe we can confirm right now, Mitch. I think Mitch is joining us Monday night for the after party. So everyone tune in. 9:00 p.m. What is it? We call it Clearwater time, Eastern time.
Yeah.
So after Aaron's live stream, that'll be really fun.
6 o'clock Mitch Water time.
Mitch Water time.
Well, that's good. That's earlier for him. Yeah.
There you go. Yep. So here's the answer to the question. Mitch started at LAC. Mitch started film at LACC and graduated from CalArts.
All right.
Mhm. That's amazing. CalArts, again, awesome place. And I am aware of LACC. I used to be called City College, and I think they took the city out a few years ago because it was Santa Monica City College. But okay, LACC. I don't know why I heard Santa Monica, but maybe I wanted to hear Santa Monica College.
We'll just say it's
That's
Santa
probably
Monica.
what yeah. But yeah,
What?
LACC. Good stuff.
Love this from Shell. No, Nog and Rom were adorbs. Dave Miscavige is a dick.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
Just like
You're not
turtles.
wrong.
Turtles are dicks, according to Aaron Smith-Levin.
Mhm.
Wow.
We got. Did we say hi to Nasty Nathaniel yet?
Oh.
Hey, Nate.
Oh,
Hey,
hi.
Nate.
So Nate, so
Didn't
last
see it.
night, let me get this straight, and maybe I've missed this in the past. You just had the camera going, and you were just standing in the middle of San Luis Obispo, just turning around, filming people. Well, not filming people, filming what you could see. And there was some dude with a bunch of women who goes, "You filming me? You're not filming me, dude." You almost started a fight, man. You almost got your butt kicked from some dude. It was great TV. Let me tell you. Of course, you talked him down because that's what you do. But hats off, sir. That was I love the First Amendment audits, but just watching the folks go walk around and get drunk. That was well worth it. I
Yeah.
hope you got some margaritas after the fact.
Yeah, Nate has some great material on his channel, Nasty Nathaniel. If everyone should subscribe.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we confirmed for Monday night after
All
party.
right.
Hot
Thanks,
diggity.
Mitch. Yay.
Oh, it's going to be great. Looking
And,
forward
Mitch
to that,
said-
good sir.
Yeah, same
Mitch
here.
said maybe the little guy on Fantasy Island.
He was a dick. The guy in real life, Herb,
Tattoo?
whatever
Yeah,
his
for
name
real?
was.
Hervé Villachet?
Tattoo?
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
so
he was
cute.
a dick.
Deplane. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was not.
Wow.
He was not very nice. I think. Well, when you
Aw.
have that kind of have to be a little compassionate because with people with who are little people or with dwarfism, it's a hard life. I mean, it's very hard. You
Yeah.
have to struggle quite a bit. So I think he had a lot of inner demons. But yeah, apparently he was a dick. And Peter Dinklage played him in a movie called something Herb, My Dinner with Herb, or something like this on HBO. And it
Really?
really went into his struggles. Yeah, it's actually a good movie,
Wow.
but
Oh,
yeah,
I'll
Herb
look that up. It
something. He
sounds
was
really
French.
interesting.
I like
Her
that. Hervé Villachet.
Villachet.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Hervé Villachet.
Hervé. Yeah.
Hervé.
Here we go.
Hervé.
David
Hervé,
Miscavige equals Gringo Hervé Villachet. That's right.
yeah. It's true.
Angry elf. Yeah.
I do like
Speaking right. Mr.
like Peter
Rourke, of course,
Dinklage.
was Khan.
Khan. Yes. So 1 degree of Kevin Bacon there, or of separation. there.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of which, Kevin has never been in a Star Trek, has he? Oh, yes, he wasn't. That was
No, he was in an X-Men movie.
he was in an X-Men movie.
Yeah, he was in X-Men
Ah.
First Class.
But Christian Slater
Yeah.
played a unnamed ensign in Star Trek 6, was it?
Yep.
Like the door slid open and he stood there and said, "Sir, you want it on the bridge," or something to that effect, and walked off. And
That's correct.
that was him. Apparently, because his mom was the casting director. if I'm not mistaken, or
Oh.
had something to do with the
Interesting.
casting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we need
I
Kevin
know.
Bacon in a Star Trek just so we can have the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. So it's a little bit closer. Kevin Bacon's done everything except a Star Trek.
Pretty much.
Oh, stories.
That's true.
I saw Hervé drunk at a club. He fell off the pool table, and a 38 Magnum, as long as his arm, fell out of his coat. Oh, good Lord. Good Lord.
Boy.
Oh, Hervé.
Oh gosh.
There was a question that they're asking if Mitch can answer, but I don't see the question.
Oh, save it for Monday.
Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah, I've gone up and I don't see it. So there we go.
All
Wow.
right. We made it.
We did.
Very
Awesome.
good.
This was
It was
really
an
fun.
amazing presentation.
This is fantastic.
Yes, thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
that
thank
was
you.
great.
Yeah, for my channel, I'm going pretty well. In the past week, I've had somewhere almost at 50 watch hours and 35 subscribers and somewhere over 220 views. And I've been putting out various, just stuff that I've appeared in over the years. So I've got a lot of our, podcasts and the stuff I did with Aaron, stuff I did with Doug, Scott Kramer. And just a few hours ago, I did post an edited of my previous PowerPoint from last week. So my history of history. So I just, got some editing software going and made a very basic edit. So I'm going to, try to get better at that as well. And for this week, I'll do the same. I don't know when exactly I'll put it up, but just keep checking my channel during the week, and I'll have that, separate PowerPoint presentation. And then for next week, I think when Juliana's back, we'll do what kind of like an introduction to religious studies and some basic concepts from religious studies, which I think will be really cool. And then from there, we will go from there. So I love
Very
doing
cool.
these PowerPoints. I love them.
Just a reminder, Mark's refreshed YouTube channel is
Turi. I was just looking for it.
at Mark A. Turi. Make sure you get that middle initial A in
That's
there.
what it is.
But yeah,
Yeah,
check
because
out
Mark Turi is taken. I have to put my middle initial. Yeah.
rude people to take. Don't they know that's your name?
There's a lot of Mark Turis in this country. In my country, there's a lot of Mark Turis. It's a
Wow.
fairly common name. So
Okay, but it should still belong to you. So definitely, everybody check out and subscribe to Mark's channel, Mark A. at Mark A. Turi. Don't
you,
forget
everyone.
Clearwater Chad at Clearwater Chad 9037 /90210.
Thanks, guys.
Marilyn Honig at Coffee Cults and Crafts. Our on here today's a members channel, Juliana Bittencourt, is at The Cyan Theologist, and yours truly at Denver Stevo. Please make sure you've checked all of them out, liked them all, subscribed to them all, and share them all with your friends and family.
And any Star Trek nerd.
Here.
If you just have a casual acquaintance and they're like, I like Star Trek, share it.
Yep.
Mitch, we will
Should I
not.
ask-
We will not forget
Wow.
to ask you about coming
Yeah.
face to face with
Holy
Chucky
Lord.
Manson.
Yeah, that's.
Oh
We got to know if
amazing.
that was
yeah.
it was in prison or before prison. Whew. Yikes.
So people could find out Monday. Am I
That's
right?
cliffhanger.
Yeah.
That's right.
And in my
That's
all
right.
right, everyone. So next week with Mark and learn about history of religion, right?
A little
Love
bit, yeah. Basic concepts of religious study concepts and something like that. That'll be nice.
Here we go.
All right. All right, everyone. Thanks so
Sure.
much, and we will
Thank
see
you
you
so
soon.
much.
See you
Bye.
soon, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.